A little girl stands before the nobleman, who is her father. The aristocrat placed an important document on the table and pointed it out to his interlocutor. The man stared at the girl. Then the aristocrat pointed to the document again and said it was an adoption agreement. The protagonist picked up the document from the table to examine it carefully. The aristocrat announced that he had decided to change the contents of the adoption agreement. The nobleman added that he had added his son from his new marriage, whose name was Lawrence, to the family register, so he no longer needed the girl. The main character, Terenzia Oblin, looks at him in surprise, and he immediately wants her to sign this redacted contract. But the girl is in no hurry. A few days before the events described, the protagonist is walking in the park. The girl is sitting on a tree branch with her friend, Tommy. He is Terenzia's only friend in this large estate. Terenzia Oblin continues to sit calmly in the tree, eating the cookies she stole from her capricious brother. The girl told her ghostly friend Tommy that her brother is a very noisy and spoiled boy. Lawrence continues running around the park looking for her sister and her cookies. The main character and her best friend sit on a tree branch and watch the angry boy. Tommy the ghost told his friend that she really loved good food. The girl listened attentively and said it was all his fault because he taught her to appreciate the little joys in life. The ghost boy chuckled at his friend's words and decided to climb down from the tree to the ground. He did so very quickly and deftly. After this, Tommy quickly climbed the tree again and hung in the air among the lush green leaves. The ghostly boy accomplished all this very quickly and easily because he can fly. The ghost smiles at the protagonist. Terenzia looks at her best friend with admiration, thinking that he lived in this estate even before she arrived. The main character also reflected on her talent, which she's possessed since birth. It turns out that Terenzia can see the ghosts of people who have already died. Moreover, even as an infant, the girl could not only see the ghosts of dead people, but also touch them. This always greatly surprised and somewhat frightened the main character's mother, who couldn't understand what was happening to her. One day, the mother of the girl, whose name was Ifia Oblin, figured everything out and told her daughter about it when they went on a picnic together in the park of their estate. Ifia Oblin loved her daughter dearly. This well-bred aristocrat from an ancient and respected family was always renowned throughout the region for her kindness, wisdom, and beauty. But one day, the most terrible thing that can happen to a person happened. Ifia Oblin died suddenly under strange circumstances, never having had the chance to raise her daughter. The heroine had a hard time dealing with the death of her mother, whom she loved dearly. Her father didn't mourn his dead wife for long because he had a secret mistress. A lustful aristocrat brought her and their son into his home a few days later. The girl's half-brother, Lawrence, took an immediate dislike to his sister. He tried every way he could to snitch on and bully Terenzia Oblin. The main character constantly felt the cold and contemptuous gaze of her stepmother, who also immediately disliked her because she wanted to make her son Lawrence the heir of Terenzia's father. The girl had a very difficult time in her own home, in a hostile environment, without the support of her mother. But she didn't give up and did everything she could to stay strong. The main character was greatly helped by her ability to see and communicate with ghosts, who became her best friends and always supported Terenzia in difficult times. The young lady coped well with difficulties and strengthened her character, learning to survive among people who did not like her. The main character turned to her friend Tommy and said that after everything she had been through over the years, she was no longer afraid of the threats of her stepbrother, who was now looking for his missing cookies. Meanwhile, Lawrence continues to wander the park, searching for his stepsister. He knows the girl can hear him, so he threatens her and says he'll report her to their father. Terenzia Oblin ignored her stepbrother's complaints. She thought for a moment and then turned to her best friend, the ghost Tommy. She said she wanted to visit her mother now. The main character's friend listened carefully and said it was a good idea. The boys secretly headed to the Duke's estate to put their plan into action. A few minutes later, the children found themselves in the spacious hall of the ducal estate. On the wall of the large room hung an exquisite portrait of the beautiful Ifia Oblin. The protagonist and her best friend stop in front of a portrait of the deceased duchess and gaze at it intently. They feel a sense of awe for the woman depicted in the portrait. Terenzia Oblin gazes intently at her mother's portrait. The girl's heart is filled with love and regret that her mother left her too soon, departing this world. It seems as if this beautiful woman is about to come to life and emerge from the carefully crafted portrait frame. But, unfortunately for the protagonist, all of this is merely an illusory fantasy. Terenzia Oblin and the ghost of Tommy continue to admire the beautiful Duchess's visage. The ghostly boy couldn't help but break the silence. He said that Ifya Oblin was a very kind woman and a good person. The main character heard her friend's words and agreed with them. Afterward, the girl noticed that her mother's portrait hadn't been dusted in a long time. Terenzia Oblin felt sad again because she realized that she missed her mother very much, whom she loved very much. Suddenly, the main character's dreams and memories were shamelessly interrupted by a loud cry from her stepbrother. The main character doesn't want to see her half-brother right now. The girl turned to her ghostly friend and said she wanted to escape the Duke's castle as quickly as possible before Lawrence Oblin discovered her. But the opportune moment for escape was missed, and the Duke managed to spot his sister near her mother's portrait. Lawrence immediately attacked, accusing her of stealing his sweets. Lawrence Oblin can't see his sister's ghostly friend. The enraged boy continues to berate the protagonist and insists that she apologize immediately for the theft she recently committed. The young Duke continues to exert psychological pressure on his half-sister. He's in a good mood today, so he stooped so low as to insult the cherished memory of his late mother, Terenzia Oblin. He said the Duke had once saved her grandfather from bankruptcy. For his service, he gave his daughter, Ifya, to the Duke as his wife. Terenzia was born from this union, but she disobeyed the Duke and contradicted him. Therefore, she deserved her sudden death. The main character listened attentively to her stepbrother's offensive words. Terenzia Oblin was extremely angry. She was so disconcerted that she asked him again if he was telling the truth or simply trying to insult her for the offense he had caused her. The boy was a little confused, despite his emotions, and said that he had just told the truth, which all the inhabitants of the Duchy of Oblin knew. Terenzia Oblin ordered her half-brother to remain silent immediately because he was now telling lies and insulting the blessed memory of Ifya Oblin. She added that Lawrence would do well to watch his words, otherwise he would be immediately punished for his lies. Young Duke Oblin is not going to back down, nor is he going to apologize for what he just said about the main character's mother. Lawrence Oblin had already raised his hand to strike Terenzia for her insolent and arrogant behavior. The girl continued to stand her ground bravely, refusing to retreat or run from an opponent stronger than her. She thinks she'll be able to land a few blows on him before she's defeated, but then she'll be able to say she was forced to hit Lawrence. Meanwhile, Tommy's ghost, who had been quietly observing the siblings' quarrel, realized things were getting serious. He decided to immediately intervene on her behalf. Terenzia Oblin noticed that Tommy's ghost was about to attack her half-brother. She knew this would end badly for Lawrence, so she wanted to stop him. But all the heroine's efforts were in vain. The ghostly boy could no longer be stopped. He dealt a powerful magical blow to the Duke, who didn't even have time to comprehend what had just happened to him. Lawrence felt a powerful blow. The Duke then flew back several meters and rolled down the stairs onto the first floor of the ducal castle. By chance, the heroine's father and his new wife were on the first floor and saw Lawrence fall down the stairs. Terrified, they quickly rushed to the boy's aid. The stepmother ran to Lawrence and laid the boy's head on her lap. She tried to revive the young Duke, but to no avail. Terenzia's father called the servants and ordered a doctor to be summoned immediately. The main character is in a state of shock. The girl didn't expect such a tragedy to happen to her brother, that he would fall down the stairs. But she understands that something terrible has happened, and there will now be dire consequences. Terenzia Oblin's father looked up and noticed her presence. The Duke immediately realized that his unloved daughter from his first marriage was involved in what had just happened. He was extremely angry with the girl. The Duke is seething with anger at his wayward daughter. The aristocrat's patience has run out. Today's incident was the last straw for his loyalty. 3 days have passed since the accident. The heroine was found guilty of the incident and placed under house arrest. The girl cannot leave her room. The ghost boy came to visit his friend and asked her if she was still mad at him for standing up for her and accidentally injuring Lawrence. Terencia listened attentively to her friend and sighed heavily. After that, the unfortunate girl said that there was nothing she could do in this situation, so there was no point in regretting. The main character looked intently at her ghostly friend and said she wouldn't be angry with him anymore. These words made Tommy very happy. After this, Terencia thought about her father. The girl knew her half-brother had been lying to her. The Duke had received his title and power through his marriage to Ifia, so Terencia was the direct heir to his entire fortune. The young Duchess knows that Lawrence Oblin is the Duke's illegitimate son. Therefore, it will be very difficult for his father to include the boy in the family register, no matter how much he wishes. Terencia also knows that in her presence, the surrounding imperial nobility will not dare to swallow up the duchy that is rightfully hers. Her father will not dare to expel his daughter, lest he lose his position among the local aristocracy. The young Duchess is now very lonely among hostile relatives, but the girl is determined and will defend her rights and inheritance until she succeeds. But this story began with the cunning Duke devising a way to get rid of her. He abandoned the girl and allowed other people to adopt her. The cunning aristocrat informed his daughter that she was immediately going to Aberdeen to live on the estate of the mysterious Ghost Duke, about whom the most varied and contradictory rumors were circulating. This news shocked the unfortunate girl, who hadn't expected such betrayal from her own father. Life had thrown a new challenge at Terencia Oblin, and she must rise to the challenge. 5 years ago, the ruler of the Cremviden Empire decided to send the powerful and noble Duke of Aberdeen to the battlefield to keep him under control. The Duke performed admirably in the war. His string of victories grew steadily, and the renowned aristocrat gained even greater esteem and prestige among the nobility and commoners of the Cremviden Empire. The emperor learned of the Duke of Aberdeen's rise and decided to give him a nearly impossible task. The renowned aristocrat was ordered to destroy a mysterious clan known as the Mortia. Members of this clan inhabit the forests along the western border of the state. They help the spirits of the dead find peace and tranquility, which greatly benefits those still alive, as they are not disturbed by restless ghosts. The emperor tried to convince the Duke of Aberdeen that the Morsha clan was manipulating evil spirits to harm the empire's inhabitants in every possible way. In fact, the Morsha clan did not commit these crimes. The envious emperor simply wanted to destroy the glorious Duke of Aberdeen by giving him a difficult task with no solution. The noble Duke and his loyal knights were forced to obey an unjust and treacherous order because they were men of duty. The aristocrats attacked the Morsia clan to exterminate all those who could communicate with ghosts. Following a brutal attack by the Duke of Aberdeen and his knights, nearly all members of Clan Morsia were killed. The last surviving member of the clan placed a powerful curse on the brave Duke and all his holdings. With his last breath, the leader of the Morsia clan uttered a terrible curse that would bring to ruin all those who dared to kill innocent people who were called by heaven for a holy mission on earth. The sorcerer cursed the Duke of Aberdeen, who would lose his wealth, honor, and glory, which were acquired through bloodshed. In his last words, the dying leader of the Morsia clan said that the Duke of Aberdeen would know no peace, either alive or dead. But the sorcerer's terrible words had no effect on the warlike Duke. With a single blow of his blade, the knight ended the mortal agony of the Morsia clan leader. Having accomplished this bloody deed, the Duke of Aberdeen and his loyal comrades returned home after some time, where a warm welcome from the inhabitants of the empire awaited them. But from that day on, real troubles began for the brave Duke. In the blink of an eye, the aristocrat and all his subjects became disembodied ghosts. The curse of the Mortia clan leader had taken effect, and it was terrible. All those who were subjected to the terrible curse became invisible ghosts, but their hearts remained alive. Even with invisible bodies, the people of Aberdeen could communicate with each other, touch all material things, and wear clothes. But for other inhabitants of the empire, who had escaped the terrible curse, the sight of disembodied ghosts wearing clothes and using various things seemed very strange and unacceptable. Gradually, the inhabitants of Aberdeen began to lose contact with the outside world, because ordinary people began to avoid these places, afraid of invisible ghosts wearing visible clothes. The ghosts attempted to recruit agents to maintain contact with the rest of the empire. But after a while, ordinary people fled the city of Aberdeen in terror, unable to bear such strange and unfamiliar communication with disembodied spirits. Gradually, everyone in the empire realized that the Duke of Aberdeen and his subordinates were cursed. Therefore, people naturally concluded that they should avoid this place at all costs. After some time, the Duchy of Aberdeen fell into complete decline. Its treasury was depleted, and the Duke's former high prestige vanished like a ghost. Frightened and perplexed, the empire's inhabitants began to spread idle gossip about the once glorious Duke of Aberdeen. Gradually, the noble aristocrat's former admirers turned into his haters. This is the story of the ghostly Duke of Aberdeen and his faithful servants, who did not abandon their master and shared his terrible fate. When this tragedy befell the noble Duke, the treacherous emperor declared an end to the 10-year war that had claimed many lives and brought enormous misfortune to both sides of the conflict. The Duke of Aberdeen immediately realized that the cunning emperor was up to no good again. The noble aristocrat remained true to himself. He sent his master a letter of thanks, and from that day on became a recluse on his estate. In a letter to the emperor, the Duke of Aberdeen asked for a child to be sent to him who could become the heir to his title and possessions. If, of course, such a child could be found. The unfortunate aristocrat locked himself in his estate, and for 5 years no one dared to send him their child, because the inhabitants of the empire were frightened by the terrible curse hanging over Aberdeen. So the main character's cruel and cunning father decided to send his daughter to Aberdeen. He wants to be rid of the unfortunate girl forever, for whom he has no pity. Terenzia Oblin carefully read the document her father had given her again. The girl realized she wasn't afraid of the ghosts that haunted Aberdeen, but she would never leave her family estate, which reminded her of her late mother. The cruel Duke was displeased that his daughter had disobeyed his will. So he stood up and leaned toward Terenzia Oblin to tell her something very important. The protagonist stands before her treacherous father and looks him in the eye bravely. Life has taught Terenzia Oblin to take a beating and embrace life's challenges. The Duke stares at his proud daughter and smiles slyly. A plan has hatched in the twisted mind of the cunning aristocrat that will help convince Terenzia Oblin to change her mind. The puzzled girl realized her father was up to something, so she sighed loudly and braced herself for more manipulation from the wily Duke. The cruel aristocrat thought for a moment, and then, without a twinge of conscience, said that if Terenzia did not submit to his will, he would dig up her mother's coffin and throw it into the field. These words horrified the unfortunate girl. She had never suspected that her father was capable of such a dishonorable act. The shameless Duke was infuriated. He rose from his desk and began pacing the room, waving his arms. The protagonist's father laughed and said he would get rid of Ifia Oblin's portrait to make his daughter obedient. The young duchess watches her cruel father closely and listens to his half-mad speeches. The girl can't believe what she's hearing. Her hands clench convulsively. Thus, Terenzia Oblin tries to contain her anger in order to make the right decision in the current situation. The girl said that she would never allow anyone to mock the memory of her dearly beloved mother. Duke Oblin listened attentively to his 8-year-old daughter and laughed loudly at her impotent threats. The wily aristocrat understood perfectly well that the unfortunate and weak girl could do him no harm. The protagonist bowed her head. She was now in a state of shock, intensified several times by the realization of her complete powerlessness in the current situation. The young duchess possesses a keen intellect and understands perfectly well that there's nothing she can do to influence the situation now. She must retreat now in order to win this cruel and unjust war with her own father in the future. Terenzia Oblin calmed down a bit and gathered her strength. She looked at the documents she had just thrown on the floor in anger. No one could help her in this difficult situation. She needed to make a decision immediately. The cruel Duke noticed the changes that had now taken place in his daughter. The girl's gaze had become less determined, and a certain hesitation appeared on her face. The aristocrat laughed again and said that it seemed Terenzia had finally realized her true position in the current situation. The protagonist's father thought for a moment and added that she was leaving for the castle of the Phantom Duke of Aberdeen the following morning. These words completely upset the unfortunate girl, who hadn't expected to have to leave her home so soon. Duke Oblain said that Terenzia must remain quiet and no longer display her prideful nature. Otherwise, she would pay dearly for it. After this, the aristocrat headed for the exit of his office. The difficult conversation was over. The unfortunate girl was left alone in the room. She clenched her little fists tightly, showing that she was not going to give in. But the young duchess had no choice but to submit to her cruel father's will and leave her home. Terenzia Oblain recalled the wonderful moments she spent with her beloved mother within the walls of her family estate. The girl also did not forget the happy walks and picnics with her mother in the wonderful ducal park, which was always filled with the fragrance of magnificent flowers. The young duchess thought that she would never again see the holy and beautiful image of her mother, which was masterfully depicted in the portrait, which had become very important to her. The unfortunate girl also loved to frequently visit Ifya Oblain's grave. There, she could reminisce about her mother and ponder her future. Now, the young duchess would leave her home and would never be able to visit her mother's grave again. Whatever you say, home is home. Here, even ghosts supported the girl, who was left to her own devices after her mother's death. Terenzia Oblain was completely immersed in these sad thoughts and memories. But a few minutes later, when the girl had calmed down a bit and thought everything through, she suddenly realized that everything wasn't so bad after all. The young duchess would still prove herself, despite being abandoned by her own father. Meanwhile, at Aberdeen Castle, his master sits in his study, carefully studying Terenzia Oblain's personal file. The ghostly duke has concluded that the girl is too young to become his ward. The Duke of Aberdeen carefully reads the documents and worries that the 8-year-old duchess might act unpredictably upon learning that he has lost his physical body. This would be frightening for anyone, let alone a little girl. The frustrated aristocrat rose from his desk and walked over to the mirror in his study. He tore down the curtain that had been covering it because it was no longer needed and looked at his reflection. But the Duke of Aberdeen saw nothing in the mirror except his suit. A disembodied ghost has no reflection. Valerian Aberdeen grew even more upset and thought that the 8-year-old girl would likely not be happy in a monastery inhabited only by ghosts, dubbed monsters by the idle gossip of the crowd. It was all very sad, but the noble duke must not despair. He must leave a flesh-and-blood heir to protect his patrimony. Therefore, Valerian Aberdeen will have to do everything he can to earn the trust and love of his adopted daughter, who is expected to arrive at his castle tomorrow. The saddened aristocrat thought how sorry he felt for the unfortunate girl, who would have to live with ghosts. But nothing could be done. This was her fate, and she would have to accept it. Valerian Aberdeen gathered his thoughts and summoned his trusted aide, Sebastian. The noble duke ordered his servant to personally deliver Terenia Oblain to Aberdeen Castle. The aristocrat is worried about whether his loyal assistant will be able to complete this important task, which may be associated with some difficulties. Polite and obliging, Sebastian bowed to his master and said he would handle the task perfectly, and the duke had nothing to worry about. The servant would prepare everything and begin the task immediately. The Duke of Aberdeen looked closely at his faithful servant and asked him to make sure that the girl was not afraid of anything. Some time later, the main character told her ghostly friend Tommy that she had been adopted by the Duke of Aberdeen and needed to leave her family estate immediately. This news greatly surprised and upset the young ghost. Terenzia Oblain didn't lose her cool when her friend burst into tears over the bad news. She reassured Tommy and told him he needed to be in good shape when he saw her off. The ghost boy is having a hard time holding back his tears. He promised his friend that he would not allow anyone to desecrate her mother's portrait once she leaves the Oblain estate. The main character listened carefully to her best friend and thanked him for his help and wonderful friendship. Suddenly, one of the Duke's servants informed Terenzia that a carriage had arrived, taking her to Aberdeen Castle. The protagonist replied that she was ready for the journey. The young duchess told her best friend, Tommy, that he shouldn't miss her and that she would visit him soon. The ghostly boy was also tasked with keeping a constant watch over the portrait of Ifya Oblain, ensuring its continued safety and that no one would dare harm it. Terencia Oblin added that she would definitely return to her home, but in a different capacity and under different circumstances. The ghost boy doesn't quite believe these words. The main character said goodbye to Tommy and went outside. There, the girl was already awaited by her father and the Duke of Aberdeen's loyal servant, whom he had sent for Terencia. Duke Oblin tries to portray himself as a loving and caring father in public, but he's struggling. Sebastian watches the young Duchess, who is destined to become his mistress, with a keen and kindly eye. Terencia read the situation and was not particularly surprised by anything, except that her cunning father turned out to be a pretty decent actor. The girl, intellectually precocious beyond her years, understands perfectly well that she is now a commodity being sold by her treacherous and evil father. And of course, the Duke will receive some benefit from the Lord of Aberdeen for his daughter. But the main character was able to verify that her father had paid a large sum of money to have his daughter taken to Aberdeen. He needed this to rid himself of his unwanted heir. Terencia began to view such things more simply. The girl was greatly amused by the way her stingy father parted with a significant sum of money. The main character turned her attention to Sebastian and was very surprised when she realized that he was a ghost. The young Duchess did not expect such a development of events, and now does not understand at all how to behave next. Duke Oblin's servants also fear Sebastian because he is a ghost. But the Lord of Aberdeen's loyal assistant calmly shows Terencia a sign stating that he has arrived to fetch and deliver the young lady to Aberdeen Castle. Sebastian doesn't yet know that the protagonist can see his ghostly body. Sebastian went to check on the carriage. Meanwhile, the main character's father decided to say a few final words to her before her departure for Aberdeen Castle. Duke Oblin leaned over to Terencia and told her that she should behave with restraint and keep her mouth shut while living in her new home. These words greatly surprised the protagonist. The wily aristocrat added that, in exchange for good behavior, his daughter would be able to live luxuriously in a new home, befitting her current status. For a moment, Terencia felt as if her father was secretly threatening her. The girl can't understand why her father treats her so badly. Yes, he has his reasons, but is it worth it? The heroine decided not to reveal her true emotions. The wise girl smiled sweetly at her father and said she wanted to tell the Duke something. Terencia Oblin told the Duke that last night she dreamed of her own grandfather, with whom she had a wonderful time. The girl's grandfather asked her to convey something to the Duke verbally, but to do so, he would now have to lean closer to his daughter so she could whisper the secret into her father's ear. The unsuspecting aristocrat leaned toward his daughter, but the girl no longer held back the emotions swelled in her heart. Terencia Oblin grabbed her father by the hem of his jacket and began shaking him violently, calling him a traitor and a terrible man. After this, the protagonist released her dismayed and surprised father. The girl relayed the words of her grandfather, whom she had seen in her dream that day. She told the Duke that he would pay for squandering Ithia Oblin's inheritance. Now Terencia must receive compensation in the form of gold bars, which the treacherous Duke was hiding in a secret place. The main character's father listened to her attentively and ordered her to immediately calm down and stop her impudent speeches. Terencia Oblin realized she urgently needed to change her disguise to outwit her wily father. The girl smiled sweetly again and said she hadn't said anything inappropriate, but had merely relayed to her father her grandfather's words, which she had heard in her dream that day. The Duke was at a loss again. He remained silent and stared at his daughter, unsure of what to say. Terencia Oblin continued to pretend nothing had happened. Meanwhile, the girl realized she knew where her father was hiding the gold bars he'd just mentioned. Meanwhile, Sebastian finished checking the carriage before the journey. The main character turned abruptly and walked away from her father, leaving him completely confused. Now the Duke realizes that his daughter knows about the hidden gold bars and may make this secret public. Terencia Oblin boarded the carriage and asked the treacherous Duke to be sure to send her regards to Carlota Oblin, her stepmother. The protagonist's father understood her hint because his second wife knew nothing about the hidden gold bars, and she must never find out. Otherwise, it would all end badly for the Duke. The girl set out on her journey. She knows that the Duchy of Aberdeen is located in the east of the Kremvidin Empire. That's why the climate there is cold. Sebastian decided to give Terencia a small gift to keep her warm on the journey. He communicated this to the girl with his sign. The Duke of Aberdeen's loyal servant handed his charge a warm dress and informed her that the duchy was currently struggling financially. The girl shouldn't be upset that she wasn't given the expensive clothes she deserved. Terenzia Oblin gratefully accepted Sebastian's gift and said she had never worn such a beautiful dress before, even if it was a little too big for her. The main character decided to ask Sebastian why the Duchy of Aberdeen is currently in poor financial condition. The girl asked the Duke of Aberdeen's servant this question and immediately stopped herself. She thought she shouldn't have asked, as her words might seem impolite. The main character decided to rectify the situation immediately. She said she would gladly wear the warm dress Sebastian had given her, lest she catch a cold in Aberdeen's frigid climate. Meanwhile, Terenzia Oblin has hatched a cunning plan. She knows how to quickly return to her family home. The girl will behave terribly at the Aberdeen estate, so they will quickly disown her. Then her father will be forced to take her back. The main character decided to begin this operation right away, so as not to waste time. The girl wants to put on new clothes and capriciously express her displeasure with Sebastian's gift. When Terenzia Oblin put on her new dress, Sebastian gave the girl a mirror so she could admire herself. The main character looked at her reflection in the mirror, and something unexpected happened. She realized that the new dress suited her very well. The young lady remembered that it had been a long time since her father had bought her such expensive and high-quality things. This began to melt the girl's heart. Helpful, Sebastian decided to help his charge a little so that she could wear the beautiful dress more comfortably, which did not fit her size. The Duke of Aberdeen's loyal servant rolled up the sleeves of the girl's dress and declared that the new clothes suited her perfectly. The main character was upset and angry at Sebastian for his kindness and consideration. Now she couldn't pretend to be a capricious child, because there was no reason for it. Sebastian broke into a satisfied smile. The main character noticed this and gave no sign that she could see the ghost's face, thanks to the gift she received at birth. The journey to the Duchy of Aberdeen passed without incident. A few hours later, the carriage arrived at its destination, and Sebastian informed his charge of the arrival. After this, the Duke of Aberdeen's loyal assistant offered Terenzia Oblin his assistance to ease her out of the carriage. The protagonist was very surprised, as she was unaccustomed to such polite treatment in the home of her cruel father. The young lady listened attentively to Sebastian's proposal, but at the same time said that she did not need help and that she could get out of the carriage herself, because there was nothing difficult about it. The main character got out of the carriage on her own and headed towards the main entrance to Aberdeen Castle. Before entering the ghostly castle, Terenzia Oblin paused for a few moments to look around. Curiosity overcame her. And that's normal in the current situation. The main character looked with interest at the gloomy castle that towered before her like a dark colossus, and immediately understood why all the inhabitants of the empire avoided this terrible place. Terenzia Oblin instantly realized she was in trouble again. This dark and frightening place looked very much like a lair of evil spirits and ghosts who could never find peace in the afterlife. Sebastian left the carriage and picked up the suitcase containing his ward's belongings. Afterward, the Duke of Aberdeen's servant headed to the ghostly castle. Terenzia Oblin followed him without further ado. On her way to Aberdeen Castle, the protagonist ponders how she will behave there. Terenzia Oblin has decided to play the spoiled and capricious girl so that she will be quickly disowned and return to her family estate. Meanwhile, the guest of Aberdeen Castle follows her guide, looks around, and never ceases to be amazed by the huge number of ghostly creatures that surround her in one place. Sebastian seems lost in his own thoughts and completely oblivious to his charge. But that's not the case. The alert servant is closely monitoring the girl's reactions to her stay at Aberdeen Castle. A few minutes later, Terenzia Oblin and Sebastian stopped at Lord Aberdeen's study. A servant knocked on the door and informed his master that he had delivered the girl to the castle. The Duke thanked Sebastian and asked him to admit the young lady into the study. The door of the room opened, and the main character entered the Duke's office, looking around with interest and surprise. A few moments later, Terencia Oblin saw the Duke of Aberdeen, who had put on his monocle because he was currently engaged in intellectual work. The surprised girl stared at the noble aristocrat and thought that he was a very handsome man. The young duchess froze in place and even opened her mouth in surprise, because she expected to see some kind of vampire or ghoul in this gloomy and cold castle, and not a beautiful ghostly man who was not averse to mental pursuits. For a moment, Terencia Oblin was a little taken aback and thought that, for the first time in her life, she had seen someone more beautiful than her beautiful mother. Then the girl collected her thoughts, came to her senses, and politely greeted the owner of the ghostly castle. Valerian Aberdeen listened attentively to his young guest and smiled at her warmly. The aristocrat thought for a moment and said he was very pleased to meet the young lady. The Duke approached his adopted daughter and said he hoped to get along with her. The aristocrat wrote these words in his journal, which he showed to the girl, thinking she couldn't hear him. The protagonist looks closely at her interlocutor and realizes she hasn't seen such polite treatment in a long time. Ever since the girl's mother died, her father and servants have treated her very poorly, as if she were a stranger. Terencia Oblin isn't sure she can trust the Duke of Aberdeen, but she notices that her new father is eager to earn her favor. The protagonist thinks she'll be able to indulge in pleasures in this house if she behaves properly. Valerian Aberdeen made a new entry in his journal and showed it to his ward. The aristocrat informed the girl that he would do everything possible to ensure her comfortable stay. He also informed her that he was now her legal guardian. The main character carefully read the Duke's message and became thoughtful. The girl was once again surprised by her guardian's politeness and courtesy. After this, the aristocrat asked if he could address his ward by her first name without titles. The girl answered the Duke in the affirmative. Valerian Aberdeen wrote that he was very grateful to his adopted daughter for allowing him to call her by her first name without unnecessary formality. This again greatly surprised the protagonist, as she was unaccustomed to such kind treatment from adults. When the audience with the Duke of Aberdeen came to an end, he called his faithful assistant, Sebastian, and asked him to take care of the young guest. The servant replied that he would be happy to show Terencia Oblin to her new room. This pleased the protagonist very much, as she was very tired from the journey and wanted to rest. Sebastian extended his hand to the main character, leading her into the room. The girl stared at the butler, and everything here seemed very strange to her. A few moments later, the main character overcame her fear and extended her hand to Sebastian, who affectionately called her Terry. After this, the butler brought the girl to the great hall of Aberdeen Castle to introduce her to the maid, whose name is Mina. The butler, the maid, and Terencia Oblin headed to the room prepared especially for the girl. The protagonist looked around and really liked her new room. The ghostly maid took a tablet and wrote her name, Mina, on it. In this palace, all its inhabitants still believe the girl cannot hear or see them. Mina asked her charge if she needed help getting ready for bed and resting after the arduous journey to Aberdeen Castle. The girl told the maid that she was fine and didn't need any help. But the maid immediately liked Terencia Oblin, so she insists that she wants to help the girl get ready for bed. Mina helped her charge change and put her to bed in a large, soft bed. This was all very unusual and surprising for the girl, who was unaccustomed to such treatment. The protagonist lies in her bed, thinking about what she's been through today. Terencia Oblin thinks it's too early to sleep, and everyone in this palace is too soft. Suddenly, the maid approached the girl again, so Terencia Oblin covered herself with a blanket and looked intently at the servant. The maid, Mina, wrote on a sign that she wanted to help her charge with something else. This surprised the girl, as she thought she was completely alone in her room. The maid picked up a soft teddy bear to give to her young mistress. Afterward, she wished the girl sweet dreams and said it was a pleasure to show her concern for her. Terencia Oblin hugged the stuffed animal and thanked the caring maid. The girl was indeed very tired today and felt overwhelmingly sleepy. Mina wished the girl sweet dreams again, and Terencia Oblin fell asleep instantly, hugging her teddy bear. Today had been a very difficult and important day. The main character has an unusual dream. She finds herself in a mysterious, dark space and hears a familiar voice calling her to follow. Terencia Oblin is perplexed, trying to figure out where she is and what's happening to her. But so far, she doesn't understand anything, so she looks around. Suddenly, the protagonist saw her mother's ghost appear before her. Ifya Oblin addressed her daughter again and called her to follow her. This greatly surprised the protagonist. Terenzia Oblin came to and was overjoyed to see her mother, who wanted to hug her. The girl was completely overwhelmed with joy, filling her heart. The main character reached out to reach her mother, but suddenly, the girl woke up and was surprised to find herself in her new bed, with her mother gone. Terenzia Oblin looked around carefully to make sure she was alone in the room. Then, sadly, she realized she had only met her mother in a dream, not in reality. The young duchess lowered her gaze, feeling very sad again. The unhappy girl remembered that she hadn't seen her beloved mother in her dreams for a long time, and she missed her very much. The main character finally came to after her sleep and decided not to waste any time, instead getting up to some mischief in this strange palace. Then the girl would definitely be returned home soon. Terenzia Oblin stepped into the corridor of Aberdeen Castle to explore and get to know the palace better. There, the girl immediately encountered a strange ghost who seemed to pay her no attention. The main character also thought about how strange it was, always so dark in this palace. The girl told herself the darkness didn't bother her and continued down the corridor, noticing the mysterious ghost. After this, something else strange happened. The main character saw a teddy bear, a gift from the maid Mina, on the floor of a dark hallway, but the girl clearly remembers leaving it in her room. This didn't faze the main character. The girl decided the teddy bear was very cute, so she'd take it with her on this little journey through Aberdeen Castle. Terenzia Oblin approached the toy, and for a moment, the girl thought the teddy bear was smiling at her. Perhaps it was an illusion, or perhaps not. The girl didn't hesitate. She picked up the cute toy from the floor and thought that she had never had such a wonderful plush friend. Her father had never spoiled the young duchess. Terenzia Oblin had always been a very smart girl. She quickly realized that the teddy bear could become unnecessary luggage for her on the journey, so she decided to leave it on the locker in the hallway for now. She would pick it up on the way back. Let this cute plush toy guard the main character's room for now. Terenzia Oblin will go about her business and get acquainted with her surroundings to better settle in and come up with a plan of action. A few minutes later, the main character stepped outside and found herself in the vast and beautiful park of Aberdeen Castle. The girl strode forward boldly, despite the unfamiliar terrain and the darkness around her. Terenzia Oblin stopped at a tall, leafy tree she planned to use for shelter. Suddenly, she heard a strange sound and realized something was wrong. The main character hadn't even had time to fully recover before she realized she'd experienced too many different experiences today. This could completely drain her strength. The girl turned around at the strange sound she'd just heard and found her teddy bear standing next to her. This simply couldn't be happening. The bear had remained in the palace, but now, somehow, he'd appeared next to the main character. From that moment on, the frightened and surprised girl's nerves began to fray a little. She couldn't understand how her teddy bear, which should now be in Aberdeen Castle, ended up here. With a trembling hand, Terenzia Oblin touched this mysterious toy, which, inexplicably, persistently haunted her. The frightened and confused girl isn't afraid of ghosts, but in this case, she encountered something very strange. Suddenly, the teddy bear, which had been lying motionless on the grass, turned its head and looked at the main character. The girl was stunned by this turn of events and became very frightened. To let off some emotional steam and protect herself, the main character hit the mysterious bear cub on the head with all her might. It was the instinctive reaction of a frightened child. The teddy bear didn't expect the little girl to treat him so unreasonably cruelly. The blow momentarily disconcerted the little bear. His vision darkened, and he nearly fainted. A few seconds later, the teddy bear came to its senses and jumped up onto its short legs. Afterwards, it angrily told the girl that it was unacceptable to do that to it. The main character stares at her new acquaintance, who both surprises and frightens her. The girl has never seen a talking teddy bear before. After this, Terenzia Oblin noticed a strange movement in the palace, and a bluish light appeared in the windows. Perhaps one of the servants had heard the noise in the garden and decided to respond. Meanwhile, the Duke of Aberdeen called his maid Mina and butler Sebastian to ask them how his adopted daughter was doing in her new surroundings. Valerian Aberdeen looked closely at his subordinates and asked how the young lady he had adopted was doing. The maid, Mina, replied that her charge had behaved very well in her new room. She then informed the master that Terenzia Oblin had fallen asleep immediately after getting into bed because she had been very tired that day. The maid thought for a moment and added that the Duke's adopted daughter was nothing like a child who was an aristocrat and raised in a noble family. These words surprised and puzzled Valerian Aberdeen. The maid said Terenzia acted strangely when offered help. Apparently, the girl was used to dealing with all the difficulties and problems in life on her own. This meant her parents weren't taking good care of her. The Duke of Aberdeen listened attentively to his observant maid and thought that he did not know the exact reason why Terenzia Oblin's father had so easily parted with his only daughter and sent her to the ghostly castle. After this, Valerian Aberdeen recalled the bright and radiant face of his adopted daughter and realized that in her former home she had suffered nothing but hardship and insult. This could not be true, and it was terrible. The angry and puzzled aristocrat ordered that a scout be sent immediately to the castle of Oblin to find out precise information about how Terenzia had lived before and how those around her treated her. The ghostly count also instructed his servants to keep an eye on the girl. She must be comfortable in the ghostly castle. Valerian Aberdeen suddenly heard his charge's agitated voice. He was very surprised. The aristocrat immediately rushed to the main character's room to check if everything was all right with her. The Phantom Duke is terrified that something bad will happen to Terenzia Oblin. Therefore, he intends to keep a close eye on her and ensure her complete safety, no matter the cost. Valerian Aberdeen entered his charge's room. The girl appeared to be perfectly fine. She was simply talking loudly in her sleep. The ghostly duke approached the girl's bed and looked at her. Terenzia Oblin was sleeping peacefully, dreaming. The aristocrat was very pleased to know that his charge was well. The main character's adoptive father adjusted the blanket so that she would not get cold and could sleep comfortably. When the duke was sure his adopted daughter was all right, he left the nursery. The main character immediately opened her eyes, as she had been feigning sleep. The girl glanced around to make sure no one else was in her room. She breathed a sigh of relief and decided to consider the situation. The main character discovered she was very clever, because she had to quickly return to her bed so no one would notice her absence. Terenzia Oblin looked at the open window of her room and remembered how she had just quickly returned to her room through it. The girl recalled the situation with the talking teddy bear she'd met in the Duke's garden. She smiled and thought that simply couldn't be true. Only if a ghost had possessed the stuffed animal. Suddenly, the main character heard someone's voice nearby. She had heard this voice before, so it seemed very familiar. The girl turned around and saw the talking teddy bear again. It turns out the encounter with the talking toy was real and not a dream, as the main character initially thought. Terenzia Oblin stares at her cute teddy bear and is happy to have such a wonderful friend. The girl took the teddy bear in her arms, laughed cheerfully, and praised him for finding his way home on his own and not getting lost in the dark and scary garden at night. The main character hugged her stuffed animal tightly and told him it was time for bed. The girl asked the bear not to pretend he couldn't hear her. She knew he understood perfectly well. Suddenly, the main character's plush friend told her she was being too protective of him. If she continued this behavior, he would tell everyone in the ghostly castle that Terenzia Oblin could see them. The young duchess let go of the teddy bear and began to watch it closely. A few moments later, the girl collected her thoughts and asked her stuffed animal what it was. This question intrigued the main character greatly. Terenzia Oblin asked her interlocutor if he was a ghost and why he had been haunting her throughout the evening. The main character decided to scare the bear cub and told him he had to tell her the whole truth. Otherwise, the girl would gouge out his eyes. It was a joke, but it was the only way Terenzia could get the truth. The girl's plush friend smiled at her warmly and said his name was Rick. He was very happy to meet Terenzia Oblin. After this, Rick the bear added that he didn't know for sure, but he was most likely a ghost. He still had to figure that out someday. The main character suggested that Rick is the spirit of a teddy bear, but this isn't certain. Perhaps there's another explanation for this phenomenon. Teddy bear Rick became a little sad and said that he didn't remember anything before he found himself in this toy body. He thought for a moment and added that he didn't remember how he died and ended up in the body of a teddy bear. Rick told how he tried to leave the ghostly palace, as other ghosts had done, but he failed. He always returned. The main character looks closely at her new friend, and for some reason, she feels sorry for this teddy bear, who doesn't know who he really is. Terencia Oblin collected her thoughts a little and asked Rick the bear why he had been following her all evening. The main character's new friend shook his head negatively, indicating that he didn't want to do anything bad, but just the opposite. Mishka explained to the girl that some evil ghost had recently mysteriously entered the palace. It was very dangerous. Any decent bear cub would have kept an eye on the ignorant girl who decided to wander alone through the ducal park at night. Rick admitted that he wanted to scare the little girl a little so that she would quickly return to her room and not wander around in a dangerous place at night. The main character laughed and said that Rick had no right to treat her like a little child because he was one himself. The teddy bear replied that he didn't remember how old he really was, but he believed he had done the right thing in the situation. The main character asked her new friend how long he had been living in the Duke of Aberdeen's ghostly castle. Mishka replied that he was not entirely sure, but that he had been in Aberdeen Castle for 4 years. The girl listened attentively to her interlocutor and declared that, in that case, she was much older than the teddy bear, and he should not treat Terencia Oblin so dismissively. The main character thought and said that all this was not so important because she had a question that was bothering her. Terencia Oblin looked closely at her plush friend and asked if there really was some mysterious evil spirit present in this estate. The protagonist knows that evil spirits are extremely dangerous to both living beings and the dead. They feed on weaker souls to replenish their strength and become more powerful. The girl also thought that a strong evil spirit could take over the body of a living person and use it at its own discretion. There are 2 ways a spirit can become evil. In the first case, it cannot let go of its grudge and constantly harms everyone. In the second case, the ghost steals the life of a living person and forever becomes an evil spirit that cannot find peace. Terencia Oblin knows the second option is the most dangerous. So the girl pondered the situation. Perhaps this is precisely the evil spirit that stole someone's life. The main character asked her friend what he thought about this. The little bear doesn't yet know what to say to his friend. These thoughts and assumptions completely ruined the girl's mood. She almost cried from frustration. The bear cub decided to calm her down a little. Rick claimed he never specifically told Terencia Oblin about an evil spirit. This ghost was merely a close approximation of an evil spirit. This time, a different thought struck the girl. She thought the teddy bear wasn't telling her everything and needed to be brought to justice. The main character said that she would tie the bear with his own bow if he did not confess to her who he really was. Rick smiled and said it wasn't that big of a deal. But in any case, a child shouldn't be wandering alone in the haunted castle park at night. The bear cub added that it was time for the girl to sleep. If she fell asleep now, he would tell her all his secrets in the morning. This didn't please the main character. Morning has come. Terencia Oblin has obeyed her stuffed animal and slept soundly. Now she's ready for new adventures. At the entrance to the girl's room stands her governess Mina, who is waiting for her charge to wake up so she can help her with her morning toilet and breakfast. The maid came to the girl's bed and wrote on a sign that she had gotten up early today. This was a good sign. Suddenly, the main character remembered that she had intended to return to her native mansion at any cost. Today, she must try to do so. The girl asked her personal maid what she would like to do in her free time today. She wants it to be a fun and eventful day. The main character suggested that today she would learn new sciences, improve herself, or study new rules of court etiquette. Terencia Oblin decided to do everything in her power today to make the worst possible impression of herself and return to her home as soon as possible. But things didn't go according to plan again. The maid wrote on her sign that the young mistress could rest today and do whatever she pleased. This greatly angered the girl, who had planned to make a bad impression. Now she doesn't know how to make her presence here unbearable for those around her. The maid Mina said that the young lady was originally supposed to attend an etiquette and geography lesson, but plans were changed at the Duke's command. Terenzia Oblin's adoptive father believes the girl needs some time to adapt to her new surroundings. Therefore, she can rest today. The maid conveyed this information to the girl, writing it on her sign. Afterward, Mina smiled and asked how else she could help her mistress. Terenzia Oblin had never expected such a turn of events. Could it really be that things weren't so bad in this ghostly estate? It turns out it could even be fun here. The main character looked closely at her maid and said that everything was already completely fine with her, and she quickly adapted to the new living conditions. The maid was delighted to have such a wonderful charge. She said that in that case, she wanted to prepare a very tasty and healthy breakfast for Terenzia Oblin. Suddenly, the main character realized she was doing something wrong, which would help her leave this house sooner. The girl burst into tears, much to the surprise of her interlocutor. Terenzia Oblin decided that in this case, she would act up without leaving her room. This would help the girl achieve her goal. The main character covered herself with her blanket again and said that she wanted to have breakfast right in her soft and warm bed. The teddy bear watched his new girlfriend closely. He couldn't help but smirk dismissively. The main character noticed her maid's eyes welling up with tears. This surprised and upset the girl greatly. Terenzia Oblin didn't expect such a reaction from her caring and efficient servant. The young duchess hastened to reassure her assistant. The girl declared it was just a joke on her part. She would wash up and have breakfast in the dining room, as was customary. So the governess shouldn't be upset. The main character herself almost burst into tears because she had unwittingly offended the beautiful girl who looked after her so well. Suddenly, the maid Mina leaned over to her charge and took her hands. The girl excitedly said that Terenzia Oblin had done nothing wrong. The efficient maid smiled and wrote on her tablet that she would now go to the Duke of Aberdeen and ask him if the young lady could eat in her room. The main character didn't have time to respond to her maid, who had already headed toward the Duke. The girl tried to stop her, but she couldn't hear her anymore. Terenzia Oblin tried to ask the teddy bear why the maid Mina was so fast, but received no answer. The main character once again addressed Rick the bear, but he chose not to respond and pretended to be asleep. The girl sits on her bed and ponders the current situation. She imagines the ghostly Duke won't allow his adopted daughter to have breakfast in bed. Terenzia Oblin is sure the Duke of Aberdeen is currently scolding her for her childish behavior. This is just the thing to get home sooner. But the ghostly Duke allowed his adopted daughter to have breakfast in the nursery. He also wanted to share the meal with the girl. The protagonist changed her clothes and sat down at the makeshift dining table. The girl realized her plans had been disrupted again, and she didn't know how to proceed. Terenzia Oblin tried again to act like a very capricious child, but this behavior only brought smiles to the faces of everyone present. The young duchess stopped her whims because she felt very hungry. Perhaps she should have breakfast first, and then put her plans into action. The main character noticed the lavishly laid table, and her mouth began to water. She had never eaten anything like it before. Terenzia Oblin can't believe her eyes. Will she really always be able to eat this well? This is simply a miracle, something she couldn't have dreamed of in her biological father's house. The main character remembered that in the Oblin mansion, she always got only scraps from her parents' table. The unfortunate girl remembered that the last time she had eaten such wonderful food was when her mother was alive. That was a long time ago. Terenzia Oblin wouldn't be herself if she didn't decide to play with her food a little. The girl took some ground pepper and, without permission, added it to the ghostly Duke's food. But Valerian Aberdeen said nothing to the girl. He simply watched his adopted daughter's behavior closely. After this, the ghostly Duke, as if nothing had happened, tried the peppered dish and didn't even show that it was very spicy. The main character thought she had really pleased her adoptive father because he loved spicy food. The thing is, Terenzia Oblin loves adding ground pepper to her food because she was never allowed to do so in her home. During breakfast, the young duchess asked her adoptive father why he wore pince-nez. Was his eyesight so poor that he needed glasses? The ghostly Duke decided to take off his pince-nez so that it would not embarrass Terenzia Oblin, and she could have breakfast in peace. Without his pince-nez, Valerian Aberdeen seemed even more handsome to the main character. This made a strong impression on the dreamy girl. The ghostly Duke decided to write an explanation in his journal that would satisfy his daughter and explain the reason for wearing pince-nez and gloves. The main character had to take a break from her delicious and healthy breakfast to read her adoptive father's explanation. The girl picked up the Duke of Aberdeen's journal and began to carefully read what he had just written in it. The phantom aristocrat wrote to his daughter that most people couldn't see him, so he had to wear gloves and glasses. This way, anyone would always be able to tell where the Duke of Aberdeen was looking. This is very important for normal communication with people who otherwise begin to get lost. The main character read the Duke's explanation and looked at him intently. He doesn't know his daughter can see him. The girl finds this a little amusing. The girl begins to understand that the servants' tales of the Phantom Duke are essentially lies. Everyone says he's a cruel war demon, but the protagonist now sees a completely different person. The wise girl continued her breakfast and was once again convinced that one should never believe the idle gossip of people who denigrate everything they envy. In fact, the Duke of Aberdeen is a good man. A few minutes later, the hearty breakfast was over, and the main character, having eaten her fill, sighed heavily. She felt like she'd overdone it a bit today. The Duke of Aberdeen also had a good breakfast and was satisfied. He informed his adopted daughter that he was now scheduled to train the knightly order, so he needed to leave the girl. The main character thought about what else she could do to look like a bad child and returned to her native estate sooner. Maid Mina noticed that the young mistress was deep in thought. This slightly alarmed the attentive servant. Mina placed her hand on her charge's shoulder and prepared to tell her something. It would lift the girl's spirits. The maid wrote on her sign that the young mistress could unwind a bit if she was bored. She could watch the knight's order training. The main character really liked this idea. The girl was delighted and thanked the sweet maid for her concern. Suddenly, Mina came to her senses and said that the young lady would definitely need to be escorted to the knight's training ground. The girl replied that she could handle it perfectly well herself. The maid shouldn't bother herself unnecessarily, as she already had so much other work to do. But the maid insists, because the young mistress still knows very little about the layout of the ghostly Aberdeen estate. The girl might get lost here. The main character came up with a way to escape the maid's overprotective attention. She distracted the maid and quickly ran away with her stuffed animal. Terenzia Oblin is too accustomed to loneliness and is afraid that someone will limit her freedom. A few minutes later, the girl found herself in the ducal park. In the bright sunlight, the park looks different than it does at night. Rick the bear suddenly became active. He wanted to ask his friend something that interested him. The girl didn't expect this turn of events. The main character isn't in the mood to answer the teddy bear's stupid questions right now. The girl says Rick should keep quiet for now. But Terenzia's plush friend Oblin insisted and asked her why she always acted as if she wanted to be kicked out of the ghostly Aberdeen estate. The main character realized that her plush friend possessed a keen mind. He turned out to be a very attentive and perceptive toy, but one who poked his nose into other people's business. Terenzia Oblin hugged Rick tightly and told him he shouldn't know the truth. Otherwise, he would be in great pain. The main character said she finally wants to hear all the information about the evil spirit the teddy bear spoke of yesterday. Now is the perfect time. If the young lady's plush friend refuses to tell her the whole truth, she will torment him until she gets her way. Rick doesn't want the girl to hurt him, so he immediately agreed to tell her everything he knows about the evil spirit that is settled in the Aberdeen estate. Suddenly, the main character heard some strange sound and looked around to find out what it was. Teddy Bear Rick pointed to the young lady in the direction of the sound with his plush paw and said that the girl would be able to find out the reason for this sound if she went there. The main character headed in the direction Rick pointed to satisfy her curiosity. Terenzia Oblin opened the door of a nearby building and entered, first carefully peering around the corner to avoid getting into another dangerous situation. The main character saw two ghosts in front of her who were closely watching an event that was very interesting to them. The girl looked around and saw other spectators who were watching some very interesting event with bated breath. At first, the young lady does not understand why all these ghosts are so agitated and why they are looking at everything here so attentively that they do not even pay attention to her. A few seconds later, the main character saw behind the silhouettes of the ghostly creatures a curious figure made up of people or their spirits. The girl watches this spectacle and tries to figure out what it is. The teddy bear knows perfectly well what all the ghosts present are doing here. The Phantom Duke sits calmly and majestically atop a pyramid composed of his knights. The Phantom Lord wonders if his soldiers weren't trained enough yesterday. Apparently, Terenzia's adoptive father, Oblin, is a little dissatisfied with his first commanders, who did not conduct a sufficiently good training for the Knights of the Order yesterday. The main character had already seen for herself that the ghostly Duke was a kind man. But now the girl saw that Valerian Aberdeen could be a very evil and strict boss. Suddenly, one of the knights punished today noticed the young lady and asked the ghostly Duke why a child was present. It was forbidden by the Order's rules. The ghostly Duke didn't expect his adopted daughter to be here. This alarmed the aristocrat. The protagonist watches her adoptive father punish his knights and can't believe her eyes. Is Valerian Aberdeen really capable of such cruelty? The Duke immediately jumped down. The pyramid of human bodies collapsed. The knights breathed a sigh of relief. Valerian Aberdeen took his adopted daughter in his arms and asked her what she was doing there. Terenzia Oblin stares at her adoptive father, unsure what to say. The girl is overcome with emotion. One of the ghostly Duke's knights was very surprised that there was a little girl there and pointed his finger at her, expressing his displeasure. The Duke of Aberdeen severely reprimanded his subordinate and ordered him to stop immediately. The girl hopes her adoptive father will no longer be angry. The knight apologized for his tactlessness. This somewhat calmed the ghostly Duke, who decided not to punish his subordinate. Valerian Aberdeen ordered his assistant, Mikhail, to continue training without him. Now, the ghostly Duke urgently needs to leave for important business. Before leaving, the Knight's commander insists that the training be carried out properly. He'll definitely check it tomorrow. The ghostly Duke's assistant understands that he is not to be trifled with and promises to provide very high-quality training for the Knight's Order's personnel. Valerian Aberdeen knows full well that his assistant can be relied upon, but he maintains a gloomy appearance for greater imposingness. The ghostly Duke is heading towards the exit of the barracks, but the main character wants to stop him because she forgot to pick up her teddy bear, which she dropped on the ground out of excitement. The adoptive father couldn't refuse his daughter this small favor. He saw the teddy bear lying in the dust of the barracks. After this, the Duke of Aberdeen picked up the teddy bear and handed it to Terenzia Oblin. The girl was pleased. The main character noticed that her adoptive father started looking at her strangely after picking up the teddy bear. Perhaps he was preoccupied with something. Terenzia Oblin hugged her stuffed animal tightly and felt that everything was okay with her now. Valerian Aberdeen noticed that his adopted daughter was happy when her stuffed animal was with her, and an approving smile appeared on his face. The ghostly Duke carried his adopted daughter to her chambers and placed her on a soft bed. He wants to speak with the girl and discuss today's events in the barracks. The aristocrat immediately asked the girl for forgiveness for the fact that she became an involuntary witness to the unpleasant procedure of punishing the Knights of the Order who had recently committed misdeeds. The ghostly Duke wrote in his notebook that he should have warned his adopted daughter in advance about the possibility of such an unforeseen incident. The main character listened attentively to her adoptive father. The girl isn't angry at the Duke and can't understand why he's apologizing to her now. Terenzia Oblin also can't understand why the ghostly Duke has become gentle and courteous again. Just now, he was so angry with his subordinates that the girl barely recognized him. Valerian Aberdeen is a little saddened that his adopted daughter was frightened today, and he was the cause. The Phantom Duke didn't want that. The aristocrat collected his thoughts and wrote in his journal that Terenzia Oblin was a little nervous and therefore needed to rest and gain strength. The ghostly Duke was about to leave the children's room, but his adopted daughter said that she had an important question that was of interest to her now. The main character gathered her strength and decided to directly ask the ghostly Duke in what capacity she was here, and whether she would become the direct heir of Valerian Aberdeen. The girl added that she only wants to know the truth. This will help her better adapt to the new environment. Terenzia Oblin added that she really wants to study because it will make her a real lady in the future. The ghostly Duke stares at his adopted daughter. He's frozen in astonishment, not expecting such a turn of events. Valerian Aberdeen asked the girl if she wanted to study various sciences and whether he understood her correctly. Terenzia Oblin replied that her adoptive father had understood her correctly. She was very keen to pursue her education and would definitely succeed. The Duke of Aberdeen considered his ward's answer. The fact was, he hadn't previously managed his estate and had entrusted it to his trusted confidants. But the confidants misbehaved and betrayed the Phantom Duke, misusing his wealth. They enriched themselves handsomely at the aristocrat's expense. These unscrupulous people only lined their own pockets and did not care at all about the well-being of the damned Duke, who had almost lost contact with the outside world and locked himself away in his own castle. The Phantom Duke turned a blind eye to this, because these people were his only connection to the outside world. So he pretended nothing was happening and lived his usual detached life. Valerian Aberdeen knew his adopted daughter had suffered severe psychological trauma when she lost her birth mother. Furthermore, life on her family estate had been a living hell for her. The ghostly Duke had long dreamed of having a living heir who could quickly deal with the traitors and restore order in Aberdeen Castle. But he didn't want to put his adopted daughter at risk. Power is always a heavy burden, especially when it's given to someone too young. Therefore, Terenzia Oblin must first get used to her new life and not burden herself with unnecessary burdens. Valerian Aberdeen cannot afford to hurt the unfortunate and fragile girl, who has already been hurt by a cruel father and a stepmother who never loved her and always dreamed of getting rid of her. The Phantom Duke thought about this a lot, sitting in his study sleepless nights. A true aristocrat will always look after those weaker than him. From today on, everything will be different. Terenzia Oblin has expressed a desire to study, so she will get what she wants. The Duke summoned Sebastian and ordered him to return the tutors hired to teach the girl. This decision surprised the butler a little, but the Duke said it was the young lady's will. Therefore, it must be done immediately. A puzzled Sebastian asked his master whether this would cause the girl any complications in adapting to her new life in the ghostly estate, and whether it would affect her safety. Valerian Aberdeen calmed his servant and sent him away. Afterward, he put his hand to his head and thought about how this whole situation was becoming too dangerous for the young Duchess. Meanwhile, the main character continues her communication with her new plush friend named Rick. The girl knitted a teddy bear and sat it in a chair. Terenzia Oblin wants to force her unruly charge to obey completely. Furthermore, he must tell his mistress all the secrets of the place. At first, Little Bear Rick resisted as best he could, but after a few minutes, he declared that from now on, he would always obey his mistress and tell her everything she wanted. The main character declared that she would not untie the cunning bear cub until he told her everything about the evil spirit that had taken up residence in the ghostly estate. The girl's plush friend said that there was no evil spirit here, but rather something like an unusual ghost that was different from the other ghosts that inhabited the Aberdeen estate. Terenzia Oblin threatened the little bear with new punishment if he did not immediately tell her the whole truth about the mysterious ghost. After this, the girl untied her stuffed animal. The bear removed the remaining rope, in which he had become slightly entangled, and said that this mysterious spirit was a young woman. This woman appears to be no more than 20 years old and is about the same height as the main character's maid, Mina. Terenzia Oblin listened carefully to Rick and asked if the girl had done anything unusual since she had settled in the Aberdeen estate. The main character's stuffed animal friend said that the ghost girl constantly tormented the servants who work at Aberdeen Castle because they are living people. It's a strange characteristic of hers. This caused the ghostly Duke a lot of problems with recruiting new service staff, who constantly quit their jobs due to fear of the evil ghost of the girl. Terenzia Oblin listened carefully to the bear and said that this was a very dangerous situation. It wasn't for nothing that the ghost girl was causing trouble for living people. There was a reason for it. The main character believes that the ghost girl was most likely wronged by someone in life and is now taking out her anger and resentment on living people. This could have very dire consequences. The girl told her friend that the offended ghost's mischief could eventually develop into something more serious. That is, into something that could no longer be stopped or neutralized. The main character pondered this situation deeply. She had too little information to draw any definitive conclusions. The girl thought that few ghosts could harm living people, but this one persistently engaged in such deeds. Therefore, it wanted to become an evil spirit. The main character thought about the ghostly Duke and his entourage. Could someone really be trying to kill them? This absolutely had to be sorted out. Terencia Oblin was horrified that Valerian Aberdeen and his good servants were in mortal danger. The girl declared that this wouldn't do. She had to, no matter what, find and capture this ghost who wanted to become an evil spirit. The teddy bear looks at his mistress and can't believe she wants to capture the ghost girl. It's a very difficult task. The girl thought for a moment and told her companion that she, too, might suffer in the future from the machinations of this evil spirit. Therefore, she must make every effort to catch the ghost. The main character asked the teddy bear where the ghostly girl might have been last seen, but the little bear is only interested in how his friend plans to deal with the evil spirit, who possesses great power. It's a very dangerous undertaking. The self-confident girl told her new friend that it would be a mere trifle for her, so the bear cub shouldn't worry about it. The protagonist decided to take the simplest and most effective approach. She set out to find the evil spirit, searching every room and corridor in the Aberdeen estate. But this brought no success to the young Duchess. The girl and her stuffed animal checked every possible hiding place where the ghostly girl could hide, but they found no one. The main character began to resent Rick the teddy bear for giving her false information. The evil spirit was last seen in the east wing of the palace, but it was no longer there. The little bear ignored his friend's anger. He said the evil spirit could be anywhere else in the ghostly palace. The bear also added that it was too late, and it was time for the little girl to go to bed so she could grow up big and strong. These words angered the main character even more. The girl quickly realized what she needed to do. She simply gagged her chatty friend, so he'd stop saying all the stupid things that irritated her. The main character's plush friend was a little upset by this and said he could talk even with his mouth gagged. Nothing would stop him from telling the truth. The girl was so carried away by the search for the evil spirit that she suddenly collided with someone in the dark corridor of the eastern wing and fell to the floor. The confused Duchess came to her senses a little and wondered who could have pushed her into this place at such a late hour. Something wasn't right. The main character looked up and suddenly saw a scary ghost standing before her, holding a bottle of wine. Apparently, this ghost doesn't take care of himself and enjoys alcoholic beverages. The young Duchess was terrified when she saw this unkempt ghost in the dark corridor of the palace. The teddy bear was also very frightened. But little bear Rick didn't lose his composure and leaned over his young mistress's face to muffle her screams. He didn't want the girl to wake the inhabitants of the ghostly palace. The protagonist has regained her composure and is beginning to calm down. She wants to understand what happened and who the suspicious individual she encountered in the hallway is. The teddy bear untied his mouth and adjusted his tie. He too seemed businesslike, eager to sort out the situation and continue the search for the evil spirit with his friend. Suddenly, the drunken ghost that the main character encountered pointed a trembling finger at the teddy bear and screamed loudly in fear. The shaggy ghost was frightened by the fact that the teddy bear could move independently and even talk. The drunken ghost had never seen anything like it. A few moments later, the frightened ghost staggered and immediately fainted. The main character and her teddy bear were not expecting such a turn of events. They cannot understand how a ghost could faint from fear. Terencia Oblin stares at the strange ghostly stranger who has fainted and is very surprised by this circumstance. The main character doesn't know what to do now. The girl understands that the ghost will soon come to and tell everyone in the palace that he saw the young lady and her stuffed animal in the hallway in the middle of the night. This cannot be allowed to happen. Terencia Oblin became very upset and began to scold her friend again, because of whom the frightened drunken ghost had fainted. The teddy bear disagrees with this approach. He believes his young mistress is also to blame for what just happened. It was she who decided to go in search of the evil spirit. The upset girl understands perfectly well that her stuffed animal is absolutely right, and now she doesn't know how to correct her mistake. At first, the main character thought she could save herself by intimidating everyone in the Aberdeen estate, but then she realized that was a bad idea. The teddy bear didn't like this stupid idea either. Ghosts are already dead and aren't afraid of anything. With rare exceptions, Terencia Oblin stared at the ghost, who was now unconscious. Another idea occurred to the girl for a way out of this situation. The protagonist doesn't want to resort to this method, but the situation demands an urgent solution. Therefore, Terenzia Oblin will do anything to overcome these difficulties with honor. The girl knows that all the ghosts that wander the world of the living do so because they experience some kind of mental anguish or dissatisfaction. At the Oblin estate, many ghosts knew that the young Duchess was able to see and communicate with them, so they protected her and helped her in every possible way. But in Aberdeen Castle, the main character will have to cope alone. The girl urgently needs to figure out a way around this problem. The main character decided to wake up the drunken ghost, who had fainted from fear, and begin negotiating with him herself. This should have a positive effect. The unkempt ghost began to come to his senses. After a few seconds, he regained his composure and asked what was going on. Terenzia Oblin confessed to the ghost that she can see him, talk to him, and touch him. The girl wants to discuss the current situation with the ghost. The frightened ghost said it was impossible. People couldn't see spirits. But the girl replied that he was mistaken about that. Besides, she could listen to the ghost right then and there and help him find peace. The main character stated that she could fulfill any wish of the ghost, but she would not fulfill wishes that involved causing any harm. But Terenzia Oblin has one condition. The unkempt ghost must forever remain silent about the girl's ability to see and communicate with spirits. This is crucial. After this, the main character pointed to her plush friend and said that he, too, would never tell anyone about the young lady's abilities. Otherwise, he would deeply regret it. The main character said this and thought that none of this would matter once she left the Aberdeen estate and returned home. The teddy bear was a little irritated by the young lady's reasoning. He asked the girl if she had finished talking nonsense. Perhaps she should finally solve the pressing problem and not get distracted. The alcoholic ghost listens attentively to the girl and her toy friend and can't believe his eyes. He thinks this simply can't be happening and that it's all some kind of bad dream. A scruffy ghost decided to examine a talking teddy bear. The ghost was convinced it was real and not a dream. The drunken ghost said he'd suspected the teddy bear was alive before, but now he was absolutely sure. After that, he looked intently at Rick and said he felt very sorry for him. If a little ghost had inhabited the toy's body, it meant he was setting himself up for big trouble. The shaggy ghost looks at the teddy bear and sees its true nature. Its eyes reflect the spirit of the little boy who lives within the body of the stuffed animal. Now, the main character begins to understand that her plush friend isn't as simple as it might seem at first glance. The soul of a little boy lives within the toy's body. When the unkempt ghost had studied the teddy bear sufficiently, he turned to the girl and told her she must not think of leaving Aberdeen Castle. The young lady had come here as the Duke's adopted daughter and his heir. Terenzia Oblin looks at her interlocutor and realizes she's just inadvertently said too much. She'd tried to be honest with the shaggy ghost, but it had backfired. The young Duchess replied to the ghost that all this was the absolute truth, but she planned to leave the Aberdeen estate soon and return home. The girl tried to explain her position to her interlocutor, saying that this castle was not the place where she should live. The young Duchess had her own home, which she needed to put in order. Terenzia Oblin's family estate is home to her friends, who are also ghosts. They are waiting for their young Duchess and miss her terribly. The girl cannot abandon them to their fate. On the other hand, the main character is very grateful to the inhabitants of the ghostly estate for treating her so well. Terenzia Oblin hasn't experienced anything like this in a long time. An internal spiritual struggle begins within the little girl. She longs to return home, but she also enjoys her stay at Aberdeen Castle. This prevents the protagonist from focusing on achieving her goal. Terenzia Oblin desperately wants to return to the house where she lived with her mother. The girl has reverted to the belief that she should stick to her original plan. Meanwhile, the shaggy ghost thought for a moment and said he had no unresolved regrets. Therefore, the young Duchess could do nothing to help him. But, despite this circumstance, the ghost decided not to tell anyone about the talking teddy bear and the main character's plans to leave the Aberdeen estate. The ghost paused and added that all this information would sooner or later become public knowledge. The young Duchess couldn't keep this secret for long. The girl was very upset when she heard these words from the shaggy ghost. The ghost decided to take pity on the main character and stroked her head, which calmed her down. The drunken ghost took a sip of wine from his bottle and said it was time for him to go about his business. The main character didn't expect this turn of events. The girl almost burst into tears at this treatment. She thought that this ghost was unlike all the other ghosts that haunted this place. She would have to find out who he really was. The drunken ghost said goodbye to the young lady of Aberdeen Castle and went about his business. The girl watched the ghost go, unable to understand anything. For the first time in her life, Terencia Oblin encountered a ghost without unresolved regrets or any other internal conflict. This is all very strange and requires a thorough investigation. The next day, the young Duchess began her studies. The Duke of Aberdeen fulfilled his adopted daughter's request and hired the best tutors for her. During her studies, the girl couldn't get the mysterious ghost beggar out of her head, which she tried to follow for some time in order to find out more information about. But the slovenly ghost continued to drink wine, wander aimlessly around Aberdeen Castle, and completely ignore the young Duchess. The girl even felt a little offended by this ill-mannered ghost for not noticing her. The main character was too immersed in thoughts about the poor ghost and did not notice that the teacher reprimanded her to stop daydreaming and focus on her studies. The young Duchess's teacher, Baron William Hines, said that they could now continue the lesson, but to do so, his student must immediately pull herself together and not be distracted from the subject being studied. The Baron told Terencia Oblin that the Duchy of Aberdeen was once renowned throughout the empire for its jewelry. The most famous was a hair ornament fashioned in the image of a white tree, the symbol of the Aberdeen family. The man who wishes to inherit the Duchy of Aberdeen must always remember this and respect the history of this glorious and majestic place on the map of the empire. The teacher again noticed that the young Duchess wasn't listening to him at all. The girl was once again lost in her thoughts about something completely unrelated. Terencia Oblin sighed heavily and asked her teacher when today's lesson would end. Baron William Hines didn't understand his student's question. He asked the girl what she meant. The main character said she was very hungry and wanted the lesson to end quickly. The teacher replied that the girl needed to be patient and more diligent if she wanted to succeed in her studies. But the good Baron felt sorry for the young Duchess. He changed his mind and said the girl could go free. Tomorrow, the teacher would check how well his charge had learned today's lesson. The teacher left the office, and the main character decided to urgently take care of her personal affairs in order to quickly bring to life all the plans she had been thinking about for so long recently. Terencia Oblin knows the Baron will report to the Duke of Aberdeen on his adopted daughter's progress. The girl watches her tutor leave the estate and dreams of him giving her the worst possible report. Suddenly, the main character turned around and saw the evil spirit she had recently been searching for in the east wing of the Aberdeen estate standing nearby. The girl was in a state of shock, as she hadn't expected to see it there in broad daylight. Could it be that an evil spirit decided to appear to Terencia Oblin just like that? No. The girl understands perfectly well that the restless ghost is up to something. The young Duchess also understands that she could now be in great danger. But a few seconds later, the main character noticed that the evil spirit was sitting calmly on the stair railing and showed no aggression. This surprised the main character greatly. Now the girl wants to get to know the ghost better. Terencia Oblin watches a ghostly girl who is looking at something intently. The main character noticed that the evil spirit was staring very closely at Baron William Hines. Furthermore, the ghostly girl whispered that she would definitely kill him when she had the chance. Terencia Oblin does not understand why the ghostly girl is so angry at the Baron, who seems like a very kind and polite person. Suddenly, the evil spirit turned around and noticed the young Duchess watching him. Their eyes met. The main character didn't avert her gaze. The girl looked boldly and resolutely at the angry ghost, and even smiled at him to ease the tension a little. After this, Terencia Oblin hurried off the balcony and closed the glass door behind her. The girl thought this would help her avoid an encounter with the evil spirit. But the ghostly girl became interested in the young Duchess and followed her to get a closer look. The evil spirit easily penetrated the glass balcony door and took the main character by the hand. The ghostly girl said she now understood why the young Duchess had so successfully evaded the ghosts without encountering them. Terencia Oblin understood everything immediately. Her biggest secret was revealed. The evil spirit now knew the girl could see ghosts and even communicate with them. This amused the ghostly girl. This was the first time she'd met someone so young who could see ghosts. This might come in handy in the future. A stuffed animal friend awaits the main character in the nursery. When the girl entered her room, Rick was overjoyed. But suddenly, the bear saw his friend enter the room, accompanied by the evil spirit he had recently told her about. This shocked the bear. Rick the bear pointed his plush paw at the ghostly girl and told the young duchess that she had made a big mistake by bringing the evil spirit with her. The main character ignores the angry bear cub. The girl says her friend Rick might meet a ghost girl. Terencia Oblin added that the seemingly evil spirit turned out to be not so evil after all, and the ghostly girl was very surprised to encounter a talking teddy bear. The almost evil spirit pointed at Rick's toy. After that, the ghostly girl asked the young duchess who it was. But Terencia Oblin asked the ghostly girl to tell her story first. The almost evil spirit agreed. It turns out the main character's new acquaintance is named Selina. Count Arietta serves under the Duke of Aberdeen. The ghostly girl Selina once served as the Count's administrator. Count Arietta has long been the manager of the largest platinum mine, which belongs to the Aberdeen family. Gradually, over time, mineral production at this mine began to decline. 2 years ago, Count Arietta told the Duke that the mine was completely exhausted. The main character listens attentively to her new acquaintance's story and says that this can't be true. It's just some kind of clever deception. Terencia Oblin clenched her fists in anger. The girl knew perfectly well that someone was secretly siphoning off Aberdeen's gold, which was why the financial situation here was so dire. The ghostly girl continued her story. While working for Count Arietta, she noticed numerous errors and discrepancies in his financial reports, indicating he was stealing platinum from the Duke. Baron Hines caught Selina investigating. This baron was a loyal servant of Count Arietta, so he immediately reported to him that Selina had discovered his financial machinations. The unfortunate girl tried to escape and hide from Count Arietta and his minions. But, unfortunately, Selina was unsuccessful. On the way, the girl was overtaken by the Count's servants, who immediately carried out his cruel orders. Selina was killed for her excessive honesty and loyalty to the Duke of Aberdeen. The main character listened attentively to her interlocutor and froze in silence. The girl was shocked by the story she had just heard. The ghost girl Selina asked her new friend to find her body and help her take revenge on Count Arietta and Baron Hines. The young duchess thought that eliminating the deceitful earl and his loyal servant would help improve the Duke of Aberdeen's financial situation. It was a good plan. The main character thought for a moment and told the ghostly girl that, unfortunately, she could not help her now. Terencia Oblin explained her decision by saying that she plans to soon return to her home estate and therefore does not wish to interfere in the affairs of the Duchy of Aberdeen. The teddy bear listens attentively to the words of his friend and cannot believe what he is hearing. The young duchess continued to insist, declaring that a deal with the ghostly girl could prove very disadvantageous for her. The heroine thought for a moment and added that she must keep her talent a secret. Otherwise, all the ghosts of the duchy would come to her with their requests and drive her crazy. The ghostly girl was very puzzled by the young duchess's answer. She hadn't expected such a turn of events. The main character's plush friend asked her why she was so eager to return to the Oblin estate. Selina, too, was curious about the answer. The girl was a little embarrassed and replied that her home held all her dearest memories. The protagonist added that memories of her beloved mother and the ghosts she befriended at the Oblin estate haunt her. She can't leave them behind. Rick the bear listened carefully to the young duchess and said that the Duke of Aberdeen could buy his adopted daughter her previous home. The main character's plush friend explained that this would be a good strategic move. But to do so, the Duchy of Aberdeen's financial affairs would first need to be put in order. The little bear added that Terencia Oblin could expose Count Arietta and his lieutenants to increase the Duchy of Aberdeen's income. These resources could be used to purchase the Oblin estate. The Duke of Aberdeen would be delighted to make such a gift for his adopted daughter, whom he intends to make his heir. Rick thought for a moment and said that if the purchase of the estate were made in the name of the Duke, then the girl's biological father and her stepmother would not be able to resist it. Terencia Oblin listened carefully to her plush friend and thought that he was a real genius because the girl really liked the idea. The main character now finds herself in the position of the Duke of Aberdeen's daughter, with all the ensuing consequences. If this plan succeeds, Terencia Oblin will never again have to deal with her father and stepmother, who never loved her and always tried to humiliate her. The girl told her stuffed animal friend Rick that he was very smart for a 4-year-old. The bear was delighted and said there was no need to thank him. The main character looked closely at her plush companion and thought how easily he discussed matters of power. Perhaps Rick wasn't as simple as he might seem at first glance. The ghostly girl intervened in the conversation and said that the teddy bear had given his young mistress a wonderful idea. After this, Celine folded her hands in prayer and told Terencia Oblin that she wouldn't have to kill Count Arietta. She would simply have to expose his deception and Celine's murder. The ghostly girl added that the young Duchess would help her get rid of the need to become an evil spirit for the sake of revenge. Selina thought for a moment and said that she would always protect the girl from other ghosts if she helped her in this matter. She was ready to swear this on the land of the dead. The protagonist listens attentively to the ghostly girl. A difficult struggle is unfolding within her soul. Terencia Oblin is now completely at a loss. The young Duchess knows that a ghost's oath to the land of the dead is sacred. If this oath is broken, the ghost will be punished for the crime it committed. The Lord of the Dead, whose name is Hades, will destroy the oathbreaker, or he will be subjected to eternal hellish torment. The main character understands that the ghostly girl can be trusted if she fulfills her promise and swears by the land of the dead. Selina will forever bind herself to Terencia Oblin with her sacred oath. She will protect the girl from evil ghosts and always be there in times of need. The main character looked deeply into Selina's eyes once again and clearly understood that this girl could be trusted, because she took her revenge and her promises very seriously. Terencia Oblin smiled at her interlocutor and said that under these conditions, she agreed to cooperate with her. The ghostly girl was delighted by this development and said that her body must first be found. It was located somewhere within the Duchy of Aberdeen. Terencia Oblin opened the Empire's atlas to discuss the current situation with her friends and develop a plan of action. The ghost girl looked at Rick the bear and asked if he needed help, because he was very small and might not be able to see the entire map of the Empire. The main character's stuffed animal friend replied that he didn't need anyone's help. Terencia Oblin noted that Rick disliked all ghosts, despite being one himself. The girl gathered her thoughts and began studying a map of the Duchy of Aberdeen to quickly find Selina's body. The protagonist wants to help the ghostly girl as much as she can and restore justice. The main character thought for a moment and asked her plush friend if the Duke of Aberdeen knew that Count Arietta was stealing gold and platinum from him. Rick replied that the Duke of Aberdeen was likely not in the dark. But for now, these questions weren't of much concern to him. The little bear thought for a moment and added that the Duke did not want to quarrel with Count Arietta because he had entrusted him with communication with the outside world of the living. The protagonist understands that after the elimination of Count Arietta, it will be necessary to establish new connections with the world of the living so that the Duchy of Aberdeen will once again become strong and rich. But now, the estate is inhabited by Terencia Oblin, a living person. The girl will be able to assume the responsibilities of Count Arietta to improve the financial affairs of her adoptive father's duchy. Terencia Oblin imagined how she would improve the finances of the Duchy of Aberdeen and be able to buy her family home, bringing her hated father to his knees. The girl was lost in her dreams. Meanwhile, the main character's stuffed friend found a suitable spot on the map of the Duchy of Aberdeen for the secret burial of Selina's body. This location is off-limits to all duchy civilians. According to the map, it's located north of Aberdeen Manor. The main character carefully examines this mysterious place on the map and asks what her friends think about it. Suddenly, the young Duchess's governess entered her chambers. This distracted the friends from studying the map. The teddy bear immediately became inanimate, and the ghostly girl became invisible to the governess. The main character thought Rick was a wonderful actor. The maid, Mina, wrote on her sign that it was time for the young lady to have lunch. She also admired the girl's diligent study of geography in her free time. Terenzia Oblin thanked her maid for the dinner invitation. The girl said she loved geography and was studying a map of the Duchy of Aberdeen. The main character left the room with her governess and asked why there was a forest next to the Aberdeen estate that was off-limits to civilians. The girl finds all this very strange because she knows little about the history of the Duchy of Aberdeen. Mina, the maid, said that the Duke and his knights regularly clear this forest of wild animals that pose a danger to the residents of Aberdeen. However, predators still appear from time to time, and they can tear apart random visitors. The governess wrote on her sign that the young lady was under no circumstances to enter the forbidden forest. Otherwise, it could end badly. Terenzia Oblin replied that she understood everything and thanked her maid for such a timely warning. A few minutes later, the young lady entered the dining room, where the Duke of Aberdeen was already waiting. He had decided to dine with his adopted daughter that day. The main character sat down at the dinner table and, according to all the rules of court etiquette, greeted her adoptive father. During dinner, Terenzia Oblin decided to cheat and asked the Duke of Aberdeen for permission to visit the duchy's commercial district. The girl knew it was located very close to the Forbidden Forest. The protagonist used all her charm to persuade the Duke. Terenzia Oblin must visit the commercial district to infiltrate the Forbidden Forest undetected. The young Duchess's new father was puzzled by this unexpected request. He asked why the girl suddenly wanted to visit the commercial district of his estate. The protagonist declared that she was the heir to the Aberdeen family. Therefore, she needed to know how her future subjects lived and wanted to see it with her own eyes. The Duke of Aberdeen thought a little about his adopted daughter's request and wrote a response in his journal. Terenzia Oblin hadn't yet read the Duke's reply, but the girl felt compelled to say that she would be a magnificent heir to Aberdeen. After this, the young Duchess leaned closer to read her father's reply. This moment is crucial for the protagonist. The girl's future fate depends on the Duke's answer. Terenzia Oblin read the Duke of Aberdeen's response to her request and was overjoyed by his consent. The girl thanked her father for his understanding and for meeting her needs. But the Duke of Aberdeen demands that his adopted daughter take her maid Mina and 2 other knights from the order with her. The protagonist realizes she must now find a way to get rid of these unwanted escorts. The wise girl pretended that everything suited her, and again thanked the Duke of Aberdeen for his understanding and assistance. The Phantom Duke is glad that he was able to fulfill his adopted daughter's wish and bring her great joy. After dinner, the Duke of Aberdeen took his daughter in his arms to take her to the knightly order's barracks. The girl felt a little awkward, sitting in her adoptive father's arms. But on the other hand, the main character is very happy that the ghostly Duke shows such great concern for her. The girl had long since grown unaccustomed to such treatment. The Duke of Aberdeen and his adopted daughter arrived at the knightly order's barracks. The protagonist immediately noticed 2 guardsmen training with wooden swords. The Phantom Duke called out to his soldiers and said that his heir was planning a walk in the commercial district tomorrow. The girl needed 2 knights to accompany her. The commander asked if there were any volunteers for the task. The Duke of Aberdeen's guardsmen immediately expressed their desire to escort the young lady to the commercial district. This surprised the girl, as she hadn't expected such a reaction from the knights. Moreover, the soldiers began arguing among themselves over who would accompany the lady on her walk. This gave the Duke of Aberdeen a headache. He decided to settle the matter immediately. The phantom aristocrat named Mikhail and Redine. They are experienced and courageous knights who will handle their commander's new mission perfectly. The Duke of Aberdeen has announced that these 2 knights will accompany his daughter on her walk through the commercial district tomorrow. The decision has been made and is not subject to appeal. A young knight hurried up to the young lady, wanting to say something to Terenzia Oblin. Suddenly, the young knight was pushed aside by a captain of the knightly order, named Michael Sertson. He wrote on a sign that he would be happy to accompany the young lady on her walk the following day. The young knight snatched the tablet from the captain of the knights again and informed the young duchess that his name was Redine Arbolt, and he was the captain's second-in-command. The main character sits in her adoptive father's arms. The girl politely greets both knights, who wish to accompany her on her walk through the commercial district tomorrow. The young duchess not only greeted her, but also introduced herself, saying her name was Terenzia Aberdeen. It was the first time the girl had used her new surname. At first, this surprised the Duke of Aberdeen, but then it caused unspeakable joy in his noble heart. The girl was also a little surprised by herself and her own words. The Duke stared at his adopted daughter, trying to understand why she said that. For a moment, the protagonist began to doubt whether she had done the right thing. She felt she had been a bit hasty. Suddenly, the Duke of Aberdeen and his knights began to cry. Terenzia Oblin couldn't understand why these grown and strong men were behaving this way. The next afternoon, the main character, accompanied by her maid Mina and two knights, went for a walk in the commercial district. Despite the early hour, the girl looks very tired. She spent the first half of the day very busy, so she's exhausted. The thing is, Terenzia Oblin had classes with Baron William Heinz that morning. It took a lot of effort on the girl's part to restrain Selena from instantly taking revenge on her attacker. The young Duchess was very tired, but she still decided to go for a walk to the commercial district to help the ghostly girl and find her body in the Forbidden Forest. A few minutes later, the main character arrived in the commercial district and felt a surge of renewed energy, as she loved everything there. The girl hadn't seen so many people gathered in one place in a long time. Terenzia Oblin was delighted to see people shopping carefree, bustling about, and enjoying life. It's wonderful because life is vibrant and inspiring. Suddenly, the main character felt a huge surge of energy, jumped up, and ran forward to plunge headlong into this new life that was not in the gloomy palace. The maid Mina watches her charge with surprise and joy. She didn't expect the tired girl to show such cheerfulness. The main character paused and thought the same thing as her maid. The girl herself couldn't understand where she'd just gotten this new strength. People bustling around the commercial district square suddenly noticed Terenzia Oblin and the ghosts accompanying her. This caused some confusion among the citizens. The Empire's flesh and blood subjects are having trouble getting used to the unusual guests from the ghostly duchy, about which various rumors, gossip, and legends circulate. The girl understands perfectly well the ordinary people who fear the curse of the Duchy of Aberdeen. But Terenzia Oblin is upset that ordinary people understand nothing and jump to conclusions based on delusions. The protagonist also understands that fear of ghosts is normal for living people, but the girl believes the Emperor is to blame for everything, for he issued an unjust order that caused the curse on the Duchy of Aberdeen. Terenzia Oblin will not allow anyone to consider the inhabitants of the ghostly duchy as terrible monsters who came from the other world to do their dark deeds. The young Duchess took her maid by the hand and suggested that she go another way so as not to arouse the suspicions of the people around her. After this, the girl handed her maid a mask that would conceal her ghostly nature from others. This greatly surprised the maid. The main character also bought masks for the knights accompanying her from a local merchant. This will definitely help diffuse the current situation. The girl laughed and asked everyone accompanying her to lower their heads so she could place their masks on them. Now the maid and the knights would be sufficiently disguised. Terenzia Oblin placed the mask on her maid's face and thought it suited her very well. The girl also found the game very funny. The main character disguised both knights as a rooster and a bunny. The maid, Mina, wore a simple mask, presenting her as a mysterious woman. The surprised maid turned to her charge and asked why she had put a mask on her. Terenzia Oblin laughed cheerfully and told her maid it was a gift. With the mask on, the ghosts accompanying her wouldn't seem so frightening to the people around her. The main character looked around and noticed that the local children were whispering and talking about a mysterious theater troupe that had appeared in the commercial district. After some discussion, the young people came to the conclusion that the ghostly guests did not look frightening in theatrical masks. Terenzia Oblin achieved her desired result. Now people look at her ghostly companions with smiles, not with fear and mistrust. This is very important to the girl. The main character looks closely at the happy passersby and understands that she has taken a very correct step, which will make it easier for her to solve the task at hand today. The young Duchess extended her hand to the maid and invited her to continue their walk, but in a new capacity and with a more positive mood. The maid Mina stares at her charge, unable to shake off her surprise. She had no idea the little Duchess was such a wise girl. A few moments later, the travelers resumed their stroll. The amusing masks evoked nothing but smiles and amusement from passers-by. The maid, Mina, wrote on her sign that there were clothing stores in the area. This piqued the young duchess's interest. The maid also told her charge that there was a famous clothing studio nearby, called Luna. This famous clothing house produces dresses so good that aristocrats throughout the empire dream of getting their hands on them at any price. The girl carefully read what the maid wrote on the sign. The protagonist thought that such a renowned atelier would have many luxurious clothes, among which she could hide and escape unnoticed into the forbidden forest. Terencia Oblin handed her maid a tablet with writing on it and said that she really wanted to visit the famous Luna studio. The maid decided to fulfill her charge's request. A few minutes later, Mina, Terencia Oblin, and two knights arrived at the renowned atelier to visit. The travelers entered the clothing store, where they were greeted by a girl who was the owner, salesperson, manager, and fashion designer, all rolled into one. Terencia Oblin smiled sincerely at the girl and greeted her warmly. The main character is a very polite and well-mannered girl. The owner of the clothing store leaned over to the young duchess and cheerfully asked her what she would like to buy for herself or her friends. The maid Mina wrote on her tablet that she served in the house of the Duke of Aberdeen and was accompanying the little lady who wanted to visit the famous Luna studio. The owner of the clothing store bowed politely and said her name was Beth. She was delighted to welcome her distinguished guests from Aberdeen Castle. After this, Beth said that the young duchess could walk around the clothing store and choose any outfit she liked. A few minutes later, the main character caught the eye of a beautiful dress that she wanted to try on. Teddy Bear Rick looked at the dress his friend had chosen and said that it was very cute and would suit the young duchess. The main character was surprised by how naturally and casually the teddy bear talked about the beauty of aristocratic outfits. Terencia Oblin approached the owner of a clothing store and said that she was going to the fitting room to try on an outfit that she really liked. The shop owner, Beth, and the young duchess's guards burst out laughing when they heard the girl's serious tone as she spoke about wanting to try on the dress. This circumstance slightly confused the main character. For a moment, the girl felt as if the adults were mocking her. Suddenly, a ghostly girl, Selena, appeared in the fitting room and asked the little lady when they would go to the Forbidden Forest to search for the body. The main character told Selena that she would immediately begin an operation to find her missing body. She just needed to wait until everyone in the store was distracted. Selena put a sheet on herself to distract everyone. Meanwhile, the young duchess must hide in the store and escape unnoticed. While the ghostly girl distracts the store workers and the young duchess's escort, Terencia Oblin quietly moves towards the exit of the clothing store. A few minutes later, the main character left Luna's studio and headed for the Forbidden Forest. The young duchess's escape was successful. The ghostly girl Selena recalls how she escaped her killers while she was still alive. She took with her important documents that prove Count Arietta's guilt and his involvement in the mass theft of the Duke of Aberdeen's property. The unfortunate girl tried with all her might to escape from her pursuers, but they still caught up with her and, on the orders of Count Arietta, killed her. When the criminals committed the murder of Selena, they decided to hide her body in the forest to hide all the evidence of their crime. The most horrifying thing is that the unfortunate girl was still alive when her killers buried her. The bandits threw damp, cold earth on Selena, who watched in a daze. But today is the day when retribution will be meted out and justice will be restored. Terencia Oblin and the ghost of Selene have penetrated the Forbidden Forest and found the place where the girl's body is buried. The main character stands over Selena's grave and thinks that perhaps this will not be enough to prove Count Arietta's crimes. The girl decided to pray for Selena's soul. She fears all her efforts may be in vain. Terencia Oblin thought for a moment and came to the conclusion that somewhere there must be documents that would confirm the guilt of Count Arietta and his accomplices. The young duchess doesn't yet know where these important documents are, but she has an idea where they might be now. The protagonist knows what she must do now. She's decided to find the documents, but to do so, she needs to find a suitable pretext to bring the ghostly knights here. The young duchess tied an expensive ribbon from her gown to a tree branch. Now she will inform the knights that she has lost an important accessory. This will allow the girl to lure the knights into the Forbidden Forest. Suddenly, Terencia Oblin and her ghostly friend heard the voices of several men nearby, discussing a murder they had recently committed there. When the ghostly girl recognized her killers, she immediately became filled with anger and hatred. Emotions overwhelm Selena, who wants to pounce on her attackers right then and there. The main character and her teddy bear noticed Selena's overly emotional state and began to worry that the ghostly girl would not commit any reckless misdeeds. A few moments later, Selena took off and ran toward the criminals who had killed her some time earlier. Terencia Oblin and her plush friend were unable to react to the situation. At the last moment, the protagonist managed to grab her ghostly friend's hand and stop her. Selena said that she must immediately take revenge on her killers. Suddenly, a black wolf appeared from the bushes next to the young Duchess and Selena, who began to growl threateningly and stare intently at the uninvited guests who had invaded his territory without asking. Terencia Oblin finds herself caught between two fires by fate. On one side are Selena's killers, and on the other, a terrifying black wolf stands before her, threatening to pounce at any moment. The wolf continues to stare at the girl, and for a moment, the main character thought there was something human in the bloodthirsty predator's gaze. The terrified girl realizes at this moment that she's on the brink of death. Something urgently needs to be done, otherwise, the young Duchess herself will soon become a restless ghost. Selena quickly intervened in the dangerous situation, standing in front of the girl and telling her to step aside. The ghostly girl decided to deal with the black wolf immediately, but it was too late. The black predator made a sharp, long leap toward the young Duchess, bearing its enormous white fangs. Terencia Oblin realized that in a moment her end would come. The girl had time to think about how she would soon meet her dead mother, and she hugged her stuffed animal tightly, squeezing her eyes shut in indescribable terror. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. A huge black wolf ran up to the main character and began cheerfully licking the teddy bear she was holding in her arms. Terencia Oblin was reborn at that moment, because deep down she had prepared herself for her inevitable death. The girl stares intently at the playful wolf licking her stuffed animal, unable to understand why it was behaving this way. The young Duchess thought for a moment and decided to give the wolf what he wanted in order to save himself. The girl told her stuffed animal that she loved him very much, but he would have to sacrifice himself to save her. After this, Terencia Oblin smiled at the wolf and handed him her teddy bear. Rick was very unhappy about this, but there was nothing he could do about the situation. A huge black wolf happily grabbed the teddy bear in its teeth and began to play with it. The main character hid behind the wolf because one of Selena's killers spotted it. The other criminals also noticed the black wolf playing with a teddy bear. At first, they were very surprised, but then decided to kill the predator so it wouldn't interfere with their dirty work. But it turned out none of them had weapons. They had only brought shovels because they were planning to dig up Selena's body to retrieve important documents they had forgotten to take the night of her murder. Suddenly, the black wolf noticed the new uninvited guests and quickly rushed towards them to drive them away from his territory, which he so zealously guards. The ghost girl and the protagonist watch as a black wolf chases after three cowardly servants of Count Arietta, who killed Selena. Justice has been served. Terencia Oblin and her friend witness with their own eyes how cowardly murderers receive the punishment they deserve for their crimes. The main character breathed a sigh of relief when the black wolf chased after the cowardly killers of her ghostly friend. Rick the bear lies on the grass after being abandoned by a playful black wolf. He's very unhappy about being used as a mere toy for a wild predator. Little Bear Rick began to protest and say that the young Duchess should let him go immediately because he was very angry with her at the moment. The main character doesn't want to let go of the teddy bear, who's angry with her. The girl once again apologizes to him for her bad behavior and promises that from now on, Rick will always be by her side, and she won't let anyone hurt him. The ghostly girl, who is very pleased that her killers were punished by the black wolf, looks at the squabble between the young Duchess and the teddy bear and laughs. Little teddy bear Rick recovered somewhat and began to calm down. He told the young Duchess that she should be more careful around him. The girl was very happy that her teddy bear was almost no longer angry with her. She laughed joyfully and told the bear so. Suddenly, the black wolf jumped out of the nearby bushes again, quickly ran up to Terenzia Oblin and began licking her cheeks. The girl hadn't expected this turn of events, so she was a little taken aback. When the huge wolf stopped expressing his gratitude to the girl for the toy she had given him, the main character thought that this mysterious predator behaved in many ways like a domestic dog that has, or once had, an owner. Terenzia Oblin is thrilled to have befriended a sweet and very strong wolf. She's even considering taking him back to Aberdeen Castle. Meanwhile, a real commotion began at the Aberdeen estate, because the Duke's assistant, Sebastian, was informed that the young Duchess had disappeared somewhere when she went to a clothing store. Sebastian immediately reported this to the Duke of Aberdeen, who was speechless for a few seconds from such shocking news. When the agitated Duke of Aberdeen calmed down a bit, he told his valet that he had sent his maid, Mina, the captain, and his deputy, with his adopted daughter, to guard the girl and keep a close eye on her. But what ultimately happened left the Duke deeply upset. The Duke of Aberdeen ordered his faithful assistant Sebastian to immediately gather the entire knightly order to search for the young Duchess. Meanwhile, Terenzia Oblin, her ghost friend, Teddy Bear Rick, and the Black Wolf left the Forbidden Forest to find the young Duchess's escorts in the commercial district. The main character has already named her wolf, who looks very much like a dog, Sooty. The girl ordered her new furry friend to stay close and be quiet. Suddenly, Mina, the young Duchess's maid, ran up to her and hugged her tightly. The excited girl was overjoyed that the girl had been found safe and sound. Mina, the maid, hugs her charge tightly. She burst into tears and said she was very worried when the young Duchess suddenly disappeared into the clothing store. A few minutes later, the knights who had accompanied the young lady during her walk ran up to Terenzia Oblin and her maid. They were also very excited and happy that the girl had been found and that she was safe and sound. The ghost knights ran up to the young lady and expressed their joy that she was completely all right. When the initial excitement of the joyful meeting had subsided, the wolf named Sooty began to cry. This startled the maid and the Duke of Aberdeen's knights. The knights wanted to attack the wolf to kill it, but the main character stood up to defend her pet and told the guards that the wolf was tame and completely harmless. The captain is worried about his charge. He said the young lady urgently needs to hide behind him because the wolf could be very dangerous. After this, the main character ordered the wolf to carry out several commands, and he obeyed. This greatly surprised the maid and the guards. At sunset, Terenzia Oblin and her friends returned to the Aberdeen estate. The anxious Duke awaited his adopted daughter impatiently at the gates of his castle. Valerian Aberdeen was the first to see his adopted daughter and her companions approaching the gates of his estate. He was both thrilled and overjoyed at that moment. The ghostly Duke immediately quickly went to the young Duchess and told her that he was very worried about her today because he was informed that the girl was missing. The aristocrat wrote this in his journal because he still doesn't know that his adopted daughter can see and hear him. The main character carefully read what the Duke of Aberdeen wrote to her and was very surprised. The girl didn't expect her new father to learn about the incident that had occurred in the commercial district that day. At that moment, Terenzia Oblin realized that all these people were deeply concerned and caring about her. The girl felt deeply ashamed of her bad behavior. She humbly bowed her head and asked her father's forgiveness for her misbehavior. The Duke of Aberdeen stares at his charge. He's glad the girl has acknowledged her guilt and is asking for forgiveness. The noble aristocrat stroked his adopted daughter's head. The Duke was overjoyed that the girl was well and had returned home. The main character looks closely at her kind father and is very grateful to him for not scolding her and for behaving with great dignity in this difficult situation for her. The girl felt like she was about to burst into tears, but she held back her tears with all her might. She thought about how she hadn't felt such care since her mother died. Before that, only the ghostly boy Tommy had cared for Terenzia Oblin at her homestead. The protagonist reread the words the Duke wrote to her in his journal. She wants to thank her kind father and is determined to be of use to him in the future. The girl lowered her eyes and prepared to tell the Duke of Aberdeen something very important. The young Duchess looked her father in the eye and said that she was the heir to the Aberdeen family and would not allow the people of the duchy to suffer unjustly. The girl will no longer allow her father to be betrayed by his vassals and have his property stolen with impunity. Also, Terencia Aberdeen will no longer tolerate the treacherous machinations of the envious emperor, who wants to destroy her new father. The young Duchess approached the Duke of Aberdeen and asked him to no longer hold back in his policy against traitors. She would now be responsible for the Duke's liaison with the living world. The ghostly Duke looks closely at his adopted daughter and cannot say a single word from the surprise and shock he experienced. After this, the Duke of Aberdeen took the girl by the hand and shook it, thanking her for her concern. Meanwhile, Count Arietta is at his estate, scolding Baron William Hines for not yet finding the documents that Selina stole before her death. The Baron is deeply embarrassed and upset by his failure in this matter, but he can't say anything in his defense. In fact, Baroque Hines hates Count Arietta with all his heart. But he's in his debt, so he's forced to listen to the Count. One day, the Baron's wife became gravely ill, and he was forced to secretly use the Duke of Aberdeen's money to help her. The Duke of Aberdeen paid little attention to his accounts because he was constantly absent from home due to his military career. Baron Hines thought the Duke wouldn't notice the disappearance of a small sum of money, but one day, Count Arietta, who was well versed in accounting, noticed the disappearance of the money that the Baron had secretly taken to cure his wife. The essentially good Baron Hines was well aware that he was doing evil, but the trap set by the vile Count Arietta eventually snapped shut. Baron Hines carried out various dirty jobs for Count Arietta for many years, but he never intended to kill anyone. The confused aristocrat told the Count about Selina only because she had been following their machinations. Baron Hines deeply regrets that Count Arietta's men killed the unfortunate girl. He didn't want things to end so badly. Today, the Baron came to the Count with a report that his men had not found Selina's body in the Forbidden Forest and had met the young Duchess of Aberdeen there. The angry Count Arietta did not like all this at all, and he began to shout loudly at his assistant. A new day dawned, and Baron Hines arrived at the Aberdeen estate to give the young lady her scheduled lesson. The main character smiles sweetly at the Baron and does not at all show that she knows about his criminal collaboration with Count Arietta. Suddenly, the Baron walked up to the table, placed his hand on the girl's textbook, and asked what she was doing in the Forbidden Forest yesterday. Suddenly, the main character said she had a question. The girl wanted to know what predation was. Baron Hines looks intently at his student and cannot understand why she is asking such strange questions today. But Terencia Aberdeen continues to pretend that she knows nothing and smiles cheerfully at her teacher. The young Duchess approached the Baron and whispered in his ear that she had recently, quite by accident, discovered documents in the Duke of Aberdeen's office that contained information about some kind of theft or embezzlement. She hadn't had time to investigate it. Now the girl wants to figure this out and understand what these unfamiliar words mean. Baron Hines became very nervous when he heard this information from the young Duchess of Aberdeen. His face even changed with excitement. The experienced aristocrat quickly pulled himself together and said that looking into other people's documents was not a good idea, even if they belonged to family members. After this, the Baron announced to his student that he would explain to her the meaning of these new words some other time. The aristocrat looked closely at the girl and pointedly said that she must keep this conversation a secret. Otherwise, there could be serious problems not only for the young lady, but also for the Baron. Baron Hines rushed to Count Arietta to tell him important information about the secret investigation into the theft of the Duke of Aberdeen's property. The Baron looks intently at Count Arietta and tries to find the words to tell him everything as quickly and accurately as possible. Count Arietta still doesn't understand what's going on. He expressed his displeasure at the agitated Baron's rude intrusion. Terencia Aberdeen's teacher collected his thoughts and told his master the important news that could cost them both their lives. Count Arietta jumped up from his seat and stopped blithely sipping his tea. He said that evidence of the theft of the Duke of Aberdeen's property could not be found. The frightened aristocrat rushed past Baron Hines, saying that he needed to urgently destroy all evidence that might be discovered during the investigation. Count Arietta, as if possessed by an unknown evil spirit, rushed to destroy the evidence of his betrayal. He now finds himself in a very dangerous situation. The Duke of Aberdeen could easily take his life if he deems it necessary. Suddenly, the Count, extremely agitated, looked out the window and noticed something strange. The aristocrat stopped to get a better look. The traitor saw that the Duke of Aberdeen's knights had already arrived at his estate. A servant stood in their path, questioning the guards about the purpose of their visit to her master. Count Arietta stares at the Duke's knights, unable to believe they arrived at his estate so quickly to arrest him. It simply couldn't be. Perhaps they were keeping a close eye on the Count, waiting for the opportune moment to arrest him. The excited aristocrat thought Baron Hines had brought the Duke of Aberdeen's guards here. He collected his thoughts a little and ran to another office. When Count Arietta ran into the office, he took some important documents out of his safe and headed to the blazing fireplace to burn these papers in the fire. The Duke of Aberdeen's traitor burns evidence of his guilt in the fireplace. But knights who have come to arrest the Count are already standing nearby. Meanwhile, the protagonist calmly sips tea and reflects on how Baron Hines acted exactly as she expected. He succumbed to the provocation and carried out Terenzia Aberdeen's plan. The young Duchess reported her suspicions and her cunning plan to her new father, who was very surprised by his adopted daughter's ingenuity. The Duke's knights reported that they had set up an ambush and had managed to seize evidence of Count Arietta's guilt. The protagonist continues to calmly sip her tea and listen attentively to everyone gathered at the council. The girl smiles mysteriously, realizing that her plan has worked perfectly. The Duke of Aberdeen asked his adopted daughter if she should add more honey to her tea. The girl was delighted by this display of concern from her father. Terenzia Aberdeen was happy to let the Duke court her and add honey to her tea. The maid Mina stopped her master. She said that so many sweets were bad for the girl. Let the young Duchess eat a proper meal first. The Duke of Aberdeen looked at his adopted daughter's maid in surprise. He realized that Mina was now telling the truth. Terenzia Aberdeen was upset that she was being deprived of sweets and asked for another small cup of tea with honey. The maid Mina agreed to pour the girl another half cup of sweet tea. Afterwards, she asked where the knight captain and his deputy had gone. The Duke replied that the knights had gone to the dungeon. After this, the aristocrat, with a very menacing expression on his face, said that his knights had an important task in the dungeon. The main character looks closely at her father and thinks again about how his mood can change instantly. In order not to frighten the girl, the Duke of Aberdeen and the maid Mina smiled and pretended that nothing terrible would happen in the dungeon. Terenzia Aberdeen smiled back at her guardians, thanking them for allowing her another cup of tea with honey. A few minutes later, the Duke of Aberdeen descended into the dungeon of his castle to find out what was happening to Count Arietta, whom he had arrested. The aristocrat met his knights, who were guarding the captive count. The guards reported to the lord that Count Arietta had lost consciousness. The Duke of Aberdeen listened attentively to his knights and ordered them to immediately bring Count Arietta to his senses. He wanted to speak with his prisoner. The guards immediately carried out their master's orders, dousing Count Arietta with cold water. He came to his senses and cursed. After this, the lying aristocrat began to justify his crimes to the Duke. He blamed Baron Hines for everything, denying his own guilt. The Duke of Aberdeen wrote on a piece of paper that Count Arietta should immediately shut up, because he no longer intended to listen to his blatantly delusional excuses. The lord of this dungeon is very determined. Now he has an adopted daughter, who will replace Count Arietta and his accomplices. The Duke will reward everyone according to their deserts. The Count became even more frightened when he realized that the Duke of Aberdeen knew all about his machinations and had irrefutable evidence of these atrocities. The Duke of Aberdeen told the traitor that he had always known everything and had left him alone only because the Earl was the only thread that connected him with the world of living people. Count Arietta has crossed the line and forever branded himself as a traitor to his overlord. For this, he will be punished. The Duke of Aberdeen took one last look at the traitor and ordered his guards to deal with him immediately, as he deserved. After this, the heroine's father turned and headed for the prison cell's exit. The knights bowed to their master and said they would carry out his order immediately. Count Arietta still tried to justify himself, but it was no use. The traitor begged for forgiveness and for the Duke of Aberdeen to give him one last chance to atone for his previous misdeeds. But the Duke remains adamant. He's completely deaf to the traitor's pleas, because for the sake of his daughter, he won't tolerate pathetic liars any longer. When the young Duchess arrived at Aberdeen Castle, everything changed. Now it was time for the Duke to take action and exact justice on all his enemies. At first, the Duke thought he had to create ideal living conditions for his adopted daughter, so that she would be completely safe. Therefore, the aristocrat did not want to fight with anyone. But one day, the young Duchess adopted the surname Aberdeen and allowed the Duke to no longer restrain her. Now he will do just that, fulfilling his adopted daughter's request. The girl will become a reliable support for the Duke of Aberdeen and his family. But for this to happen, solid ground must be laid. The Duke of Aberdeen will ensure a brilliant future for his daughter. In the meantime, he will be her reliable shield, even if it means descending into the very depths of hell. A week later, Count Arietta died mysteriously in the underground prison of Aberdeen Castle. Baron Hines and other nobles who participated in crimes against the Duke of Aberdeen were stripped of their titles. The traitors were then banished from the Duchy of Aberdeen without the right to return. The nobles who had not been seriously guilty and admitted their guilt swore allegiance to the Duke of Aberdeen and entered into a new treaty of cooperation with him. The main character is overjoyed to have been able to help her new friend, Selina. All those responsible for the girl's death have been punished. The ghost girl's only regret is that she couldn't kill her attackers with her own hands. Still, Selina is pleased with the result. It's time for breakfast. Terenzia Aberdeen heads to the dining room, where she's greeted by servants ready to attend to her every wish. The main character realizes that lately, all the servants have been very nice to her, because she helped the Duke of Aberdeen restore order to the estate and deal with all of his traitors. The girl understands perfectly well that her father's servants had to endure a lot, but they did not leave their master, no matter what. The main character also managed to return the stolen funds to the Duke of Aberdeen. With this money, the estate was restored to its proper condition, making it a much better place to live. Terenzia Aberdeen took her seat at the dinner table and greeted the Duke of Aberdeen. The protagonist's father also greeted her. The breakfast was pleasant and relaxed. The girl had a wonderful time with her father and thoroughly enjoyed the delicious food. The main character drinks tea and thinks about how to improve her financial situation so that she can buy the Oblin estate and all the surrounding lands. Terenzia Aberdeen thought that she could use her talent to increase her income and become rich enough to buy a home of her own. The main character asked Selina to protect her from various ghosts, from whom she would demand their treasures. But the ghost girl didn't like the idea at all. Selina dismissed the idea of such a way to earn money and said she wouldn't protect her friend if she engaged in such activities. The girl decided not to anger her friend. She would find a kind ghost with a lot of money. He could become her sponsor. Terenzia Aberdeen ponders her next move. Meanwhile, someone is secretly watching the girl. A mysterious ghost, who had been secretly watching the young Duchess, approached her and decided to talk. This greatly surprised the girl. Terenzia Aberdeen stares at the stranger who wants to talk to her. An unfamiliar ghost in rich clothes and with golden hair smiled kindly at the young Duchess and said that the lady had a very kind expression on her face. The inexperienced girl was a little embarrassed and thought that this beautiful ghostly girl could very well be some kind of swindler who wanted to profit at the expense of the child. The golden-haired ghostly girl said he could help the young lady obtain a large sum of money. She had an interesting proposition for Terenzia Aberdeen. The ghostly girl finally introduced herself to the protagonist. She said her name was Layla, and she was a priest who could exorcise evil spirits. Terenzia Aberdeen was very surprised when she learned the occupation of the ghostly girl Layla. She didn't expect to meet a priest who knew how to work with evil spirits in Aberdeen Castle that day. Layla smiled at her interlocutor, pleased that she'd managed to interest her. That's why she'd come here. The ghostly servant of God thought for a moment and said that she came from another world where many different demons lived. After ordination, all priests gain the ability to exorcise evil spirits from unfortunate people who have undergone this test. Layla also acquired the ability to exorcise demons and was a member of her priestly caste at home. But one day, the girl died while pursuing an evil spirit named Javaris. After her death, the ghostly girl found herself in the protagonist's world, along with the demon she was pursuing. Layla doesn't know why. The young Duchess's new acquaintance said that the demon Javaris was still very dangerous because he had managed to possess a human when he arrived in this world while fleeing Layla. He must be caught and destroyed immediately. The ghostly girl thought for a moment and said that Terenzia Aberdeen wanted to start a business to earn money to buy the Oblin estate, but it would take a lot of time and effort. Moreover, after the scandal with Count Arietta, the Aberdeen family's reputation was greatly damaged. Therefore, few would want to do business with the young Duchess. The girl listens attentively to Layla and understands that she is now telling the truth. The main character asked the ghostly girl if she knew how to fix the situation. Layla answered affirmatively. Terenzia Aberdeen's new acquaintance advises her to enlist the support of the Empire's most powerful aristocrats, but this will require some effort. Layla said that the young Marquise Gervas Amatris was suffering from the possession of the demon Javaris. The young Duchess would need to use her friend Selina to exorcise the evil spirit from the young Marquis. Afterwards, the servant of the god would destroy the dangerous demon. This would be beneficial to everyone. After meeting Layla, the protagonist decided to discuss the matter with her father's assistant, Sebastian. He informed the girl that the son of the Marquis of Ametris had been suffering from a mysterious illness for 6 months. Therefore, the Ametris family was leading a reclusive life. Sebastian added that all members of this noble family had left the capital to devote themselves entirely to the treatment of the young Marquise Ametris. The young Duchess listens attentively to Sebastian. She's thinking about how the young Marquise Gervas Ametris is in imminent danger of death, as a cunning demon will take all his powers for himself. She needs to find a way to approach the Ametris family. After some time, Terenzia Aberdeen began taking dance lessons in order to show herself worthy at the upcoming balls. The sociable and kind girl quickly became friends with her dance teacher, who teaches her the art of dance brilliantly. Overall, the main character enjoys her dance classes, and they go well, but not without some hiccups, bruises, and bumps. Terenzia Aberdeen's dance lesson today isn't going smoothly. She lost her balance and fell. The teacher is very concerned about the girl's safety. The young Duchess doesn't want to upset her dance teacher. The girl said she was perfectly fine, and after that, she stood up. Rick the teddy bear watches them, making caustic jokes about his mistress. Suddenly, the Duke of Aberdeen entered the room to check on his adopted daughter's progress in the field of dance. The noble aristocrat gazed at his adopted daughter for a few moments. He was pleased with how the young Duchess's studies were going. The Duke of Aberdeen entered the dance hall. The main character and her teacher bowed to the gentleman and greeted him politely, according to all the rules of court etiquette. The dance teacher asked the gentleman what brought him there. He replied that he wanted to see how his adopted daughter's dance classes were going. The beautiful dancer smiled at the ghostly Duke and said that Terenzia Aberdeen was making progress in her studies. The girl was doing quite well, although she had some difficulties. But that could be remedied. The teacher looked meaningfully at the Duke and added that at her student's debut ball, she would have many dances with the Duke of Aberdeen. She had planned it that way. This greatly surprised the main character's father. The young Duchess listens attentively to her teacher and understands that she is not yet ready for the ball. Therefore, she needs to study hard to avoid embarrassment in front of her father and the guests. The Duke of Aberdeen was also very nervous when he heard that he would be dancing a lot with his adopted daughter. He also didn't want to embarrass himself in front of the girl, as he barely knew how to dance. The main character immediately realized that her father couldn't dance. He was always preoccupied with military affairs and devoted little time or energy to the intricacies of court life. Terenzia Aberdeen laughed and asked the Duke if he would be so kind as to dance with his daughter. A noble aristocrat dare not refuse such a flattering offer. The Duke of Aberdeen took his adopted daughter by the hand and began to dance with her. After a few minutes, the Duke of Aberdeen realized that Terenzia, too, still had much to learn. But the aristocrat thoroughly enjoyed the experience of dancing with his adopted daughter. The main character's father doesn't want her to fall while dancing, so he thoughtfully picks her up. Terenzia Aberdeen was deeply ashamed in front of her father because she couldn't dance. She asked the Duke if he would deprive her of her status as his heir because of this. But the noble aristocrat pays no attention to his adopted daughter's nonsense. He continues to enjoy the dance and his companionship. Suddenly, the protagonist felt the warmth of her father's hand. The girl realized that, despite his ghostly form, the Duke of Aberdeen radiated genuine human warmth. Terenzia Aberdeen looked intently at her father and thought that she must do everything to lift the curse on the Duke and his people. Then everyone would be truly happy. The main character recalled how her mother taught her as a child. She said that a curse was like a door lock that needed the right key. Mother always told Terenzia Aberdeen that she was a very smart girl and would figure it out. She just had to remember that the key and the lock it unlocked were always in the same place. The girl remembered all this and thought that perhaps the solution to the curse lay within him. The young Duchess also reflected on the fact that she couldn't yet restore her father's humanity. But Terenzia Aberdeen could restore his good reputation and improve the new family's finances. When the girl restores the honor and fortune of the Duke of Aberdeen, it will no longer matter whether there was a curse or not. The main character is eager to help her new family and friends restore their reputations and prosperity. She will do everything in her power to achieve this. Terenzia Aberdeen dreams of protecting the smiles of these kind people who welcomed her as their own daughter. The dance between the protagonist and her father continues. Terenzia Aberdeen has realized that she wants to become a true member of this family and do everything in her power to restore it to its former glory and grandeur. When the dance ended, the aristocrat put his daughter down on the floor and noticed that she suddenly became sad. Terenzia Aberdeen thought for a moment and said she had no friends at all in her new estate. The Duke regretted not having thought of this sooner. The main character hastened to reassure her father and told him he had nothing to worry about. She simply wanted to make new friends so she could have more fun and feel more comfortable living in Aberdeen Castle. The Duke immediately relaxed and reflected on how honest and intelligent his daughter was. This pleased the noble aristocrat. Terenzia Aberdeen suddenly announced that there was someone she really wanted to befriend. If he was willing, the girl would become his best friend. The Duke asked who that person was. The young lady replied that the man she liked very much was the young Marquis Gervais Amatrice. The Duke of Aberdeen didn't expect such a response, but he immediately realized that his daughter's union with the Amatrice family would be very beneficial for his family. The Marquis of Amatrice's holdings are located nearby and also have access to the sea, which provides significant income. Money flows like water around here, so Terenzia Aberdeen has chosen a very advantageous match. The Duke should think about that. The young Marquis Gervais Amatrice is currently suffering from some mysterious illness. Perhaps the girl should visit him and pay him a courtesy call. All these thoughts flashed through the Duke of Aberdeen's mind in an instant. Meanwhile, the young lady closed her eyes, smiled, and waited for her father's answer. The Duke of Aberdeen thought for a moment and replied to his daughter that the young Marquis was now very ill, so it would be difficult to visit him in order to get to know him better and become friends. The main character said she wanted to visit the young Marquis to cheer him up and help him recover sooner. This would be a wonderful start to a close friendship. The Duke of Aberdeen listened attentively to his daughter. He believes she is absolutely right in the current situation. However, a visit to the young Marquis of Amatrice could still be difficult. The aristocrat patted his daughter on the head and agreed with her. He would arrange a visit to Marquise Amatrice, but he would accompany the young lady as he could not send her so far alone. Terenzia Aberdeen was overjoyed to have persuaded her father to visit Marquis Amatrice. The girl thanked the Duke and thought about how she would soon be able to help her new friend Layla destroy the evil spirit she had long been pursuing without success. But to do this, the main character will need the help of her ghostly friend, Selena. Without her, she won't succeed. The Duke of Aberdeen went to his office and summoned Sebastian's assistant. He asked the secretary if his adopted daughter knew Marquise Amatrice personally. Sebastian replied that Terenzia Aberdeen didn't know the young Marquise personally. The Duke listened to his secretary and considered his answer. The aristocrat can't understand why his daughter chose to befriend a boy she's never even met. It seems very strange. The main character's father collected his thoughts and instructed Sebastian to conduct a secret investigation and figure out why the young Duchess so strongly wants to be friends with the young Marquis Amatrice. A week later, Terenzia Aberdeen, accompanied by her father, went on a courtesy visit to the luxurious estate of the Amatrice family. When the girl arrived at the Amatrice estate, she noticed that it had a very cozy and bright atmosphere. Unlike the ghostly Aberdeen Castle, The main character and her father entered the Amatrus estate. The girl noticed that the servants there greeted them rather coolly. A few minutes later, the guests were greeted by the castle's owner, Marquis Geron Amatrus. He greeted the Duke of Aberdeen and his daughter politely and reservedly. Terencia Aberdeen noted that the relationship between the Duke and the Marquise was somewhat strained. The young Duchess gazes intently at the noble aristocrats. She sees the air between them electric, as if before a thunderstorm. Suddenly, Marquis Amatrus smiled tensely and invited his guests into his house. This somewhat surprised the protagonist. Terencia Aberdeen can't understand what's happening here. The young Duchess suspects there are some circumstances she hasn't taken into account. The main character looked around and noticed that ghosts also lived in the Amatrus estate. The ghosts talk about how 5 years have passed since some mysterious events that Terencia Aberdeen knows nothing about. The young Duchess heard one of the ghosts say that the Duke of Aberdeen and the Marquis of Amatrus were once best friends. The main character looked at her father and realized that he had left his seclusion for her sake, to meet the man with whom he had long since stopped communicating. Marquis Amatrus looked intently at the Duke of Aberdeen and said reproachfully that in 5 years his friend had never contacted him or sent even a short message about himself. The owner of this house smiled tensely again and asked the Duke what brought him here. After this, the Marquis suddenly burst into a shout and loudly reproached his friend for not responding to his letters and not letting him into Aberdeen Castle after the curse happened. The Duke of Aberdeen listens calmly to his friend and remains stubbornly silent. He doesn't know what to say in response, because he feels no guilt, but he regrets that this happened. Marquis Amatrus looked intently at his guest and, more calmly, asked whether he would continue to ignore his questions. The Duke of Aberdeen replied that he had come here on a courtesy visit only because the young Duchess had requested it. There was no other reason for the visit. Marquis Amatrus was extremely angered by the Duke of Aberdeen's response. The protagonist feels as if he's about to explode from the rage that overwhelms him. The young Duchess decided to intervene in the tense situation to ease the tension. She said she wanted to see the young Marquis as soon as possible. Marquis Amatrus said that he would take the guest to his son, but he was not feeling well at the moment. The door to the young Marquis's room opened, and the main character saw a boy lying on the bed. Terencia Aberdeen immediately noticed that Gervas Amatrus was a little out of sorts. He looked strange lying in his bed. The main character, who was able to see ghosts, immediately saw an evil demon in the form of a black panther next to the boy, who had taken possession of the young Marquis. The Marquis approached his son and said that the young Duchess Terencia of Aberdeen had come to visit him on a courtesy visit and wanted to meet him. Gervas Amatrus looked closely at the Duke of Aberdeen and asked his father what the ghost was doing here. The main character's father hastened to introduce himself and told the boy that he had not seen him since his birth and was glad to see him again. The boy carefully read what the Duke of Aberdeen had written to him in his journal and said he knew of his father's friend. The elder Marquis was embarrassed and said he had no such friend. He still held a grudge against the Duke. Rick, the teddy bear sitting in the young Duchess's arms, quietly told her that the boy was in very bad shape. It was immediately obvious, even without a doctor. He wouldn't last much longer. The protagonist stares at the young Marquis and thinks things are even worse than she imagined. A very dark aura surrounds the boy, draining him of all his strength. A young lady approached Gervas Amatrus and extended her hand. She introduced herself and said she wished to befriend the young Marquis. The boy listened attentively to his interlocutor and said his name was Gervas Amatrus. He was a little embarrassed by the girl's eagerness. The young Marquis collected his thoughts a little and asked Terencia Aberdeen why she wanted to be friends with him, especially since they hadn't even met before. The main character stares at the boy who stumped her with his unexpected question. She doesn't know what to say. To ease the awkward situation, Terencia Aberdeen laughed sweetly and said that they were neighbors and their fathers were friends. So it would be only right if the boys became friends too. Moreover, the main character noticed that Gervas Amatrus was very handsome. The illness suited him very well, if one could say so in the current situation. The young Marquis liked what Terencia Aberdeen had said. The boy extended his hand for the young lady to shake, and the friendship between the young Marquis and the young Duchess officially began. Suddenly, the boy became ill and began coughing up blood. This horrific sight shocked everyone present. Marquis Amatrice embraced his son to give him first aid. The main character stands next to the Duke of Aberdeen. The girl feels sorry for the young Marquis. Gervase Amatrice's father shouted to his servants to summon a doctor immediately. The situation was becoming critical. The young Duchess watches the Marquis suffer and frantically fusses to find a doctor and help his son. Terenzia Aberdeen also fears that Gervase Amatrice is about to die. The Marquis hugs his sick son and begs him to hold on and not give up. The doctor will arrive soon and everything will be fine. The Duke of Aberdeen informed Marquise Amatrice that he and his daughter would wait outside. If necessary, he could summon his personal physician from the Aberdeen estate. Marquis Amatrice read his best friend's letter and thanked him for his sympathy and moral support. Gervase Amatrice is still recovering from his attack. The Duke of Aberdeen told his daughter that they now needed to leave the Marquis and his son so as not to disturb them. The protagonist reluctantly leaves her new friend's room. She glances back to catch another glimpse of Gervase Amatrice, who is unconscious. Terenzia Aberdeen sees an evil spirit possessing the young Marquis and gradually draining his life force. The protagonist realizes the boy has only a short time to live unless she saves him. That same day, the young Duchess, the teddy bear Rick, the ghost girl Selena, and the demon hunter Layla held a meeting to decide what to do to save the young Marcus. The main character resolutely declared that the evil demon that had possessed Gervase Amatrice must be destroyed today. Otherwise, the boy would not live to see tomorrow. Layla suggested that they once again discuss all the details of the plan to expel and destroy the evil demon that she had been hunting for a long time. The plan calls for the young Duchess to use her ability to see ghosts to lure the evil demon out of the boy's body. After this, Selena will attack the evil demon and make sure that he is completely under her power. And then the ghost hunter Layla will destroy the demon that is so cruelly tormenting the young Marquise Amatrice. The protagonist believes she has come up with the perfect plan of action. Layla is also very enthusiastic about this plan. But the ghost girl, Selena, doesn't share the general enthusiasm. She has some doubts and misgivings about the plan. Selene looked intently at the young Duchess and said she would be putting herself in great danger by luring the evil demon out of the boy's body. It could end tragically if Terenzia Aberdeen made a mistake. The brave girl listened carefully to her friend and said she couldn't simply stand idly by. She had to use all her strength and resources to save the unfortunate Marquise. The ghostly girl was very pleased with the young Duchess's answer. She looked at the girl approvingly and decided to support her plan to save the unfortunate Gervase Amatrice. Selena patted the young Duchess on the head and said she would watch over her closely and protect her, ensuring that the girl would come to no harm. Layla added that she would also help Terenzia Aberdeen. The main character laughed and thanked her friends for their support. The girl was very happy to have such good friends. After this, the young Duchess noticed the teddy bear, who was silent and looked very displeased. The girl was puzzled by this circumstance. The main character decided to ask why her stuffed animal friend Rick looked so displeased. After all, the girl had come up with a brilliant plan that her friends had just approved. Terenzia Aberdeen told Rick that he needed to act immediately. Otherwise, the young Marquise wouldn't survive the night. The teddy bear listened carefully to his friend and said that he was perfectly aware of all the risks associated with this dangerous business. Terenzia Aberdeen has become angry with her stuffed animal because he doesn't explain specifically why he's in a bad mood or what's bothering him. Finally, Rick the teddy bear was ready to have a frank conversation with the girl. He said he was angry with the young Duchess because she always forgot about him and put him in the background. The main character realized that Rick was upset with her for recently calling Gervase Amatrice her best friend. This deeply offended the teddy bear. The young Duchess took her teddy bear in her arms and tried to explain to him that he was wrong to be upset with her and that all his friends were equally good to her. The girl laughed and said that friends can sometimes quarrel. That's normal, but the main thing is that friends make up afterwards and don't hold grudges against each other. Rick the teddy bear said that sometimes he feels like the young Duchess treats him like a pet rather than a friend. This can be very offensive and unpleasant. The main character's plush friend added that her plan to save the young Marquise could fail and then the girl would be in great danger. The main character paused for a moment and stared at Rick the bear. She realized she could die today if things didn't go as planned. Terenzia Aberdeen collected herself and told her stuffed animal that she had never had so many friends care for her at once. But everything was fine now. The girl was in no danger. The rescue of the young Marquise would go exactly according to plan. The main character tried to reassure her faithful plush friend, who was very worried about her. The girl said she would act very carefully and responsibly. The ghostly girl Selena did some reconnaissance at the Amatress estate. She said the Marcus's room was located next to his son's. This might come in handy. The main character changed her clothes to make it easier to climb the balcony and escape the demon if necessary. She said the Marquise would be able to come to her aid if anything went wrong, as his room was nearby. Afterwards, Terenzia Aberdeen went out onto the balcony of her room and told Rick the bear not to worry too much. She would be fine. The girl's faithful friend looked after her with concern and asked her to be extremely careful and not get into any unexpected trouble. The main character promised that everything would be fine. After that, the girl prepared to climb from her balcony up into the tree to get to the young Marquis' room. Terenzia Aberdeen has a lot of experience climbing trees, so she easily jumped from her balcony and got where she wanted. It was quite easy for the nimble girl. A few seconds later, the main character quickly descended the tree trunk to the ground, where her friends were already waiting for her, who would join her in rescuing the young Marquise today. Without delay, all three friends headed towards the young Marquise in complete silence to deal with the demon and save the boy who was dying. A few minutes later, Terenzia Oblin climbed onto the balcony leading to Jervis Amatress's room. The girl entered his room by the light of the full moon. Before this, the main character asked her friends to strictly adhere to the plan to save the boy and carefully monitor everything that happens in the young Marquis' room. Terenzia Aberdeen paused for a moment and prayed for everything to work out. The girl was very nervous and fearful of unforeseen circumstances. She was also worried about Jervis Amatress. The protagonist gathered her strength and set about executing her plan. She loudly addressed the demon standing next to the boy and began provoking him into conflict in every way possible. The evil demon noticed the girl provoking him. He didn't like it at all and began to get angry. Terenzia Aberdeen remains calm and continues to communicate with the demon, who is somewhat confused and tries to stop the girl. The main character understands perfectly well that she is now confronted by a very powerful demon, possessed by an insatiable thirst for murder. But the girl holds her own and doesn't show any sign of being overly frightened. Terenzia Aberdeen collected her thoughts and stared at the demon. The girl boldly told the evil spirit that she could destroy it if she chose to do so. An enraged demon leaned over the sleeping boy, asking how a pathetic mortal dared disturb him and threaten him with imminent death. Jervis Amatress remains unconscious. The demon refuses to let him go and continues to feed on his life force. Now the moment had come when Terenzia Aberdeen became angry. She looked at the suffering boy and with all her soul hated the insidious demon who was tormenting him. The brave girl resolutely told the evil demon that he had one last chance to save himself. If he released the boy immediately, he would be allowed to escape. If the demon disobeyed Terenzia Aberdeen's will, he would be mercilessly destroyed. Suddenly, the evil ghost lunged at the brave Duchess. He planned to kill the girl with one powerful blow from his strong clawed paw. The main character expected something like this to happen, but the girl didn't think it would happen so soon. She was counting on stalling for time and bringing the demon to his senses. Terenzia Aberdeen somehow managed to escape the evil demon's sharp claws. This time, he missed and prepared to attack the girl again. The young Duchess shouted to her friends to get to work and try to catch the dark ghost. Selena immediately rushed towards the demon to neutralize it while it was away from the boy's body that was feeding it energy. Demon hunter Layla also got to work. She distracted the evil ghost, taking the blow herself. While Selena and Layla were fighting the evil demon, the main character quickly went to the young Marquise to help him and support him at such a critical moment. The brave girl embraced Jervis Amatress. She tried to bring the unfortunate boy back to his senses, but the young Marquise remained unconscious. The first thing the main character did was check the boy's breathing. Terenzia Aberdeen was delighted to discover that the young Marquise's breathing had evened out somewhat, and he seemed more relaxed. The young Duchess turned her attention to her friends, who were fighting the demon. The girl realized that her plan was failing, as the evil ghost had proven so powerful. The demon had already managed to push aside the ghostly girl Selena, and was preparing to attack the hunter, who had been pursuing him for a long time. Selena has recovered somewhat from the demon's powerful blow. The ghostly girl can't figure out what kind of magical power this powerful spirit is using. The demon was very angry with Terenzia Aberdeen and her friends. He said he'd let them play for a while, but now the ghost would fight truly mercilessly. The demon hunter lies on the floor, pinned by her fierce enemy. The girl can't understand why her power can't overcome this evil ghost. This has never happened to her before. The main character watches intently as her friends battle a powerful demon. The girl notes that this evil ghost didn't seem so powerful to her earlier in the day. Suddenly, the demon turned its attention to Terenzia Aberdeen and the young Marquise, who imbued it with a huge amount of energy. The evil spirit stares at the brave girl who dared to stand up to him and realizes that he desires her immediate death. The ghostly girl Selena tries to stop this. She wants to distract the evil demon, but it's no use. Demon hunter Layla also tried to distract the evil ghost, but he was already preparing to make a deadly leap that would take the life of the young Duchess. Concentrated evil in the form of a furious demon can no longer be stopped. The evil ghost has directed all its power and all its rage at a little girl who wants to save her friend. Terenzia Aberdeen hugged the young Marquise tightly and braced herself for her inevitable death within moments. The girl had already said goodbye to life and was awaiting the demon's final blow. Suddenly, the protagonist heard a mysterious voice, but a familiar one she'd heard before. The stranger said it was too early for the little Duchess to think about death. Then something strange and unimaginable happened. The evil demon howled in pain. Someone had dealt him a powerful magical blow. The evil ghost hadn't expected it at all. The confused girl saw that she and the young Marquise were enveloped in some kind of mysterious glow, which served as a kind of energy shield. The evil demon had accidentally fallen under the spell of this mysterious protective magic, which had appeared out of nowhere. This destroyed him. The dark ghost began to painfully dissolve into thin air. The evil spirit finally tried to ask the great demon lord for help, but it was no use. He simply vanished from sight. After the evil demon disappeared, cute ghostly cats appeared in his place, flying in the air throughout the young Marquis's room. The main character looks at everything that is happening and cannot understand how it happened that she remained alive, and the powerful demon disappeared into thin air. The girl continues to hug the young Marquise, who is already feeling a little better, and also looks with surprise at the cute ghostly cats. The ghostly girl, Selena, quickly ran up to the young lady and hugged her tightly. She was overjoyed that Terenzia Aberdeen had survived and had managed to free the young Marquise from the evil demon. Selena is very worried about Terenzia Aberdeen's health and asks if she was hurt during the evil ghost's attack on her. Suddenly, the Marquis of Amatrus burst into the room, along with the Duke of Aberdeen. They were dressed in their nightgowns, having rushed to the young Marquis's chambers as soon as they heard a strange noise. Marquis Amatrus ran to his son's bedside and asked the main character what she was doing there at such a late hour and why she was hugging the young Marquise, who was unconscious. The young Duchess looks intently at the Marquis and does not know what to answer him now or how to explain what is happening here. Marquis Amatrus approached his only son, for whom he would be deeply worried, and suddenly discovered that his sweet boy was improving. The young Marquis's fever had subsided, and he was simply sleeping peacefully, gaining renewed strength. The main character expected something like this to happen, but the girl didn't think it would happen so soon. She was counting on stalling for time and bringing the demon to his senses. Terenzia Aberdeen somehow managed to escape the evil demon's sharp claws. This time, he missed and prepared to attack the girl again. The young Duchess shouted to her friends to get to work and try to catch the dark ghost. Selena immediately rushed towards the demon to neutralize it while it was away from the boy's body that was feeding it energy. Demon hunter Layla also got to work. She distracted the evil ghost, taking the blow herself. While Selena and Layla were fighting the evil demon, the main character quickly went to the young Marquise to help him and support him at such a critical moment. The brave girl embraced Jervis Amatrus. She tried to bring the unfortunate boy back to his senses, but the young Marquise remained unconscious. The first thing the main character did was check the boy's breathing. Terenzia Aberdeen was delighted to discover that the young Marquise's breathing had evened out somewhat, and he seemed more relaxed. The young Duchess turned her attention to her friends, who were fighting the demon. The girl realized that her plan was failing, as the evil ghost had proven so powerful. The demon had already managed to push aside the ghostly girl Selina, and was preparing to attack the hunter, who had been pursuing him for a long time. Selina has recovered somewhat from the demon's powerful blow. The ghostly girl can't figure out what kind of magical power this powerful spirit is using. The demon was very angry with Terenzia Aberdeen and her friends. He said he'd let them play for a while, but now the ghost would fight truly mercilessly. The demon hunter lies on the floor, pinned by her fierce enemy. The girl can't understand why her power can't overcome this evil ghost. This has never happened to her before. The main character watches intently as her friends battle a powerful demon. The girl notes that this evil ghost didn't seem so powerful to her earlier in the day. Suddenly, the demon turned its attention to Terenzia Aberdeen and the young Marquise, who imbued it with a huge amount of energy. The evil spirit stares at the brave girl who dared to stand up to him and realizes that he desires her immediate death. The ghostly girl Selina tries to stop this. She wants to distract the evil demon, but it's no use. Demon hunter Layla also tried to distract the evil ghost, but he was already preparing to make a deadly leap that would take the life of the young Duchess. Concentrated evil in the form of a furious demon can no longer be stopped. The evil ghost has directed all its power and all its rage at a little girl who wants to save her friend. Terenzia Aberdeen hugged the young Marquise tightly and braced herself for her inevitable death within moments. The girl had already said goodbye to life and was awaiting the demon's final blow. Suddenly, the protagonist heard a mysterious voice, but a familiar one she'd heard before. The stranger said it was too early for the little Duchess to think about death. Then something strange and unimaginable happened. The evil demon howled in pain. Someone had dealt him a powerful magical blow. The evil ghost hadn't expected it at all. The confused girl saw that she and the young Marquise were enveloped in some kind of mysterious glow, which served as a kind of energy shield. The evil demon had accidentally fallen under the spell of this mysterious protective magic, which had appeared out of nowhere. This destroyed him. The dark ghost began to painfully dissolve into thin air. The evil spirit finally tried to ask the great demon lord for help, but it was no use. He simply vanished from sight. After the evil demon disappeared, cute ghostly cats appeared in his place, flying in the air throughout the young Marquis's room. The main character looks at everything that is happening and cannot understand how it happened that she remained alive, and the powerful demon disappeared into thin air. The girl continues to hug the young Marquise, who is already feeling a little better, and also looks with surprise at the cute ghostly cats. The ghostly girl, Selina, quickly ran up to the young lady and hugged her tightly. She was overjoyed that Terenzia Aberdeen had survived and had managed to free the young Marquise from the evil demon. Selina is very worried about Terenzia Aberdeen's health and asks if she was hurt during the evil ghost's attack on her. Suddenly, the Marquis of Amatrus burst into the room, along with the Duke of Aberdeen. They were dressed in their nightgowns, having rushed to the young Marquis's chambers as soon as they heard a strange noise. Marquis Amatrus ran to his son's bedside and asked the main character what she was doing there at such a late hour and why she was hugging the young Marquise, who was unconscious. The young Duchess looks intently at the Marquis and does not know what to answer him now or how to explain what is happening here. Marquis Amatrus approached his only son, for whom he would be deeply worried, and suddenly discovered that his sweet boy was improving. The young Marquis's fever had subsided, and he was simply sleeping peacefully, gaining renewed strength. The main character expected something like this to happen, but the girl didn't think it would happen so soon. She was counting on stalling for time and bringing the demon to his senses. Terenzia Aberdeen somehow managed to escape the evil demon's sharp claws. This time, he missed and prepared to attack the girl again. The young Duchess shouted to her friends to get to work and try to catch the dark ghost. Selina immediately rushed towards the demon to neutralize it while it was away from the boy's body that was feeding it energy. Demon hunter Layla also got to work. She distracted the evil ghost, taking the blow herself. While Selena and Layla were fighting the evil demon, the main character quickly went to the young Marquise to help him and support him at such a critical moment. The brave girl embraced Jervis Amatrus. She tried to bring the unfortunate boy back to his senses, but the young Marquise remained unconscious. The first thing the main character did was check the boy's breathing. Terenzia Aberdeen was delighted to discover that the young Marquise's breathing had evened out somewhat, and he seemed more relaxed. The young Duchess turned her attention to her friends, who were fighting the demon. The girl realized that her plan was failing, as the evil ghost had proven so powerful. The demon had already managed to push aside the ghostly girl Selena, and was preparing to attack the hunter, who had been pursuing him for a long time. Selena has recovered somewhat from the demon's powerful blow. The ghostly girl can't figure out what kind of magical power this powerful spirit is using. The demon was very angry with Terenzia Aberdeen and her friends. He said he'd let them play for a while, but now the ghost would fight truly mercilessly. The demon hunter lies on the floor, pinned by her fierce enemy. The girl can't understand why her power can't overcome this evil ghost. This has never happened to her before. The main character watches intently as her friends battle a powerful demon. The girl notes that this evil ghost didn't seem so powerful to her earlier in the day. Suddenly, the demon turned its attention to Terenzia Aberdeen and the young Marquise, who imbued it with a huge amount of energy. The evil spirit stares at the brave girl who dared to stand up to him and realizes that he desires her immediate death. The ghostly girl Selena tries to stop this. She wants to distract the evil demon, but it's no use. Demon hunter Layla also tried to distract the evil ghost, but he was already preparing to make a deadly leap that would take the life of the young Duchess. Concentrated evil in the form of a furious demon can no longer be stopped. The evil ghost has directed all its power and all its rage at a little girl who wants to save her friend. Terenzia Aberdeen hugged the young Marquise tightly and braced herself for her inevitable death within moments. The girl had already said goodbye to life and was awaiting the demon's final blow. Suddenly, the protagonist heard a mysterious voice, but a familiar one she'd heard before. The stranger said it was too early for the little Duchess to think about death. Then something strange and unimaginable happened. The evil demon howled in pain. Someone had dealt him a powerful magical blow. The evil ghost hadn't expected it at all. The confused girl saw that she and the young Marquise were enveloped in some kind of mysterious glow, which served as a kind of energy shield. The evil demon had accidentally fallen under the spell of this mysterious protective magic, which had appeared out of nowhere. This destroyed him. The dark ghost began to painfully dissolve into thin air. The evil spirit finally tried to ask the great demon lord for help, but it was no use. He simply vanished from sight. After the evil demon disappeared, cute ghostly cats appeared in his place, flying in the air throughout the young Marquise' room. The main character looks at everything that is happening and cannot understand how it happened that she remained alive, and the powerful demon disappeared into thin air. The girl continues to hug the young Marquise, who is already feeling a little better, and also looks with surprise at the cute ghostly cats. The ghostly girl, Selena, quickly ran up to the young lady and hugged her tightly. She was overjoyed that Terenzia Aberdeen had survived and had managed to free the young Marquise from the evil demon. Selena is very worried about Terenzia Aberdeen's health and asks if she was hurt during the evil ghost's attack on her. Suddenly, the Marquis of Amatrus burst into the room, along with the Duke of Aberdeen. They were dressed in their nightgowns, having rushed to the young Marquis' chambers as soon as they heard a strange noise. Marquis Amatrus ran to his son's bedside and asked the main character what she was doing there at such a late hour and why she was hugging the young Marquise, who was unconscious. The young Duchess looks intently at the Marquis and does not know what to answer him now or how to explain what is happening here. Marquis Amatrus approached his only son, for whom he would be deeply worried, and suddenly discovered that his sweet boy was improving. The young Marquis's fever had subsided, and he was simply sleeping peacefully, gaining renewed strength. The ghostly girl, Selena, quickly ran up to the young lady and hugged her tightly. She was overjoyed that Terenzia Aberdeen had survived and had managed to free the young Marquise from the evil demon. Selena is very worried about Terenzia Aberdeen's health and asks if she was hurt during the evil ghost's attack on her. Suddenly, the Marquis of Amatrus burst into the room, along with the Duke of Aberdeen. They were dressed in their nightgowns, having rushed to the young Marquis's chambers as soon as they heard a strange noise. Marquis Amatrice ran to his son's bedside and asked the main character what she was doing there at such a late hour and why she was hugging the young Marquise, who was unconscious. The young Duchess looks intently at the Marquis and does not know what to answer him now or how to explain what is happening here. Marquis Amatrice approached his only son, for whom he would be deeply worried, and suddenly discovered that his sweet boy was improving. The young Marquis's fever had subsided, and he was simply sleeping peacefully, gaining renewed strength. The ghostly girl, Selina, quickly ran up to the young lady and hugged her tightly. She was overjoyed that Terenzia Aberdeen had survived and had managed to free the young Marquise from the evil demon. Selina is very worried about Terenzia Aberdeen's health and asks if she was hurt during the evil ghost's attack on her. Suddenly, the Marquis of Amatrus burst into the room, along with the Duke of Aberdeen. They were dressed in their nightgowns, having rushed to the young Marquis's chambers as soon as they heard a strange noise. Marquis Amatrice ran to his son's bedside and asked the main character what she was doing there at such a late hour and why she was hugging the young Marquise, who was unconscious. The young Duchess looks intently at the Marquis and does not know what to answer him now or how to explain what is happening here. Marquis Amatrice approached his only son, for whom he would be deeply worried, and suddenly discovered that his sweet boy was improving. The young Marquis's fever had subsided, and he was simply sleeping peacefully, gaining renewed strength.